Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, July 27th, 2018. My name is Michael Brooks. On a Michael Friday, this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's Casual Friday, Benjamin Dixon, host of The Benjamin Dixon Show. We're breaking down the new Cohen-Trump drama. It's all on tape, but will that make any difference? Plus, the Trump tariff game. Is it the final drama-fueled play of a system that has been the failure since the beginning? And over 20 progressive lawmakers sign a letter protesting the political imprisonment of Lula da Silva and also call for the arrest of Marielle Franco's assassins. Benjamin and I are also going to talk about that. Then Ben Mankiewicz, Turner Classic Movies, The Young Turks. We're talking about why Kimberly Guilfoyle really left Fox News. And the contradiction of Fox News in a post-global sexual harassment ring environment still being the main propaganda organ of the Trump administration. And he's going to give us a movie recommendation. And then, oh, wait for it, people, like Kosha Nostra here, we're going to war against Trevor Noah. And I didn't want this war. But literally multiple people sent me things this morning that made the war find me. So it's on Trevor. It involves the worst way to interview AOC imaginable, and a little history lesson in something called the Marikana Massacre. Let me just tell you something, folks. I think all comedy's on the table at all times. But trying to pull off Jerry Seinfeld meets Minor Massacre hybrid mashups, very hard to pull off. And Trevor Noah didn't. Plus, we've got some Rudy Giuliani sound. We've got some Trump bragging about destroying the Affordable Care Act. Bill O'Reilly is most likely extremely drunk and talking about ICE. And the White House says that North Korea has returned the remains of dead U.S. soldiers, which is a good thing. And, of course, very satiating for the thousands of parents of dead Korean War soldiers that talked to Trump about it. Not trying to be a jerk about that, but just remind you of that kind of interesting claim. Republicans endorsed Jim Jordan's speaker's bid and make no mention of the sexual abuse that he allegedly ignored. And I don't even know. Here it is. Scott Walker's trailing his Democratic challenger by 13 points as Donald Trump's poll numbers sag in an extremely sad fashion across the Midwest. All that and more on today's Casual Friday Majority Report. The 4-day work week man is out. The rest of the crew is in. And Michael Cohen is going at Trump. We don't know all of the different machinations here. To be honest with you, I find the idea of Trump paying off women that he had sex with both literally physically nauseating, but also, like, honestly, some of the least offensive things that this guy's ever done in his life. Like, I think the Capone tax evasion comparison is very apt here when we talk about Trump in these stories. This guy is a hideous human being. And we're talking about everything from, housing discrimination to the Russian mafia to exceedingly credible rape allegations. Like, this is a really awful guy, not to mention everything he's done since he's been in office and promoting racism and xenophobia and everything else. That being said, and of course, none of this Michael Cohen stuff is going to have any effect on the cult base. I think we're already seeing the Midwestern people that maybe were in a deep economic desperation. Maybe we're shaken in by the fraudulent 2016 economic populism. They might already be flipping. I don't think this is going to make any difference with his base. But I do think in the context of the Kavanaugh nomination, the context of just a kind of broad general pressure on right-wing Democrats and on specifically Collins and Murkowski and everybody in the sanctimony caucus in the Republican Senate who enable Trump every day, even as they're super concerned about him being mentally unstable and racist. This type of thing is useful. And now, of course, Michael Cohen, sources close to Michael Cohen say that Trump knew about the meeting that Don Jr. was taking with the Russian lawyer, which, I mean, yeah, I believe that.
To the extent I can really know about anything.
To the extent that I mean know about. That's a very deep existential question. And another person, I mean, this is just literally like the Trump administration is just like a sort of like national vomiting of like all of the worst things about New York City being just inflicted on the rest of us. And here's another person, just a ghoul who, if not in jail, should at the very least be pleasantly out of public life. Rudy Giuliani. This is a funny mashup of his changing opinion on Michael Cohen from March 2018 to July 2018.
Are you concerned at all that Michael Cohen's going to cooperate with prosecutors?
No, I expect that he is going to cooperate with them. I don't think they'll be happy with it because he doesn't have any incriminating evidence about the president or himself. The man is an honest, honorable lawyer. No, I expected something like this from Cohen. He's been lying all week. I mean, or for two. He's been lying for years. I mean,
Okay. I mean, I will definitely say that Rudy Giuliani is definitely a credible person to talk about lying for years.
That's the point about all this. Like, we were talking about when people watch this, they're not getting informed. They're getting the idea that they're informed.
Right.
Like, you're wasting your time. Really, this is just like how you should treat cable news is how that it documents people perjuring themselves. But like that, you can't trust anything they're actually saying on there, especially like people that represent this administration.
There is not a single trend in modern politics from, again, like the racialized policing fused with predatory real estate, Wall Street, down to giving speeches to the terrorist MEK that is instigating for war in Iran, that Rudy Giuliani has not been involved in. I mean, this is the one thing I will say about these Trump people. They really like pure scumbag.
Do you think that Rudy is losing his acuity a little bit, or do you think he just doesn't give a shit anymore if people catch him lying blatantly?
I think that Rudy I think it's both and. I think as Barack Obama would say, it's not a question of either or, it's both and. Is Rudy losing his mind? Of course he is. Is he a fundamentally unethical, dishonest swine? Yes.
That's fair.
That's how I would view it.
Did we ever play the video of him dancing in Tel Aviv? I think we might have.
Yeah, I think that led me to say some comments that really upset my grandmother. It was a joke about kites. It was a joke about being willing to do PR work for Hamas. Just watching that video alone. Hamas is a right-wing religious organization, so I don't like them. It's not really that complicated. Okay.
And we really don't like kites either.
We hate kites. That's right.
Only thing we hate more than kites is math, people.
Ooh.
Or maybe like a kite with math on it would be like the worst thing.
That's the worst thing. This is what happens is the baby is at the checkpoint. All right, Israeli impression saved for the fun half, and once again, this identity politics. I'm partially Jewish, I can do it. All right, we'll be right back with Benjamin Dixon on the Majority Report.
Janeiro, Charlie Baltimore, Iceberg Slim, the most shady, Frankie Baby. We here.
Do you know what beef is? Do you know
ain't
what
going
beef
nowhere.
is? Ask yourself. Do you know what beef is?
All right, joining us now, I hope he's there. We've had a touch of a technical hiccup, is Benjamin Dixon, host of The Benjamin Dixon Show. Ben, are you there?
I'm here, Mike. How's it going?
Good, man. Sorry about that. Thanks for being here.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure as always. Let's start with, we played this clip up front. It was a funny mashup of Rudy Giuliani in March saying, you know, Michael Cohen's a totally stand-up guy. He's not going to bail on us. And now, you know, a couple of months later, he's always been a liar. He's always been a shyster, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I mean, okay, this, you know, there's tapes now pertaining to these payoffs. Michael Avenatti says he has a couple of other women. They're the same scenario played out. And now we have this accusation about the Russia meeting. I mean, that's just sort of setting the table. What's your read on this, kind of generally speaking? What do you think, it's relevant?
You know, I think of course it's relevant, right? But how much impact will it actually have on the president? We already know he's a liar. So I don't think it's really going to touch him as much as his son, potentially, because of his Trump Jr.'s testimony before Congress, possibility of some perjury there. So I think that's the highest stake component of this is what did his son actually testify, and can this testimony from Cohen have any impact in terms of perjury, that kind of thing. But still, again, it doesn't do anything but reveal what we knew about Donald Trump, and there's still a layer of insulation. I don't know how much of this is actually going to reach him.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, seems, I mean, also there's the other element that I said in the beginning as well, which is like, I actually think, frankly, I mean, I find this sort of Trump behavior actually to be, I mean, it's gross just because it involves Donald Trump and sex. It's probably the least, I mean, this guy, I mean, racial discrimination, Russian and, you know, Five Families mafia connections, exceedingly credible allegations of rape, a political career built on lies, oligarchy, and bigotry. I mean, in some ways, it's like, sure. I mean, of course, this would be the, you know, okay. What else could we know about this guy, right?
Yeah, that's the big thing, Mike. Like, there's really nothing about Donald Trump's character that is going to be surprising to us, and that's a critical component in terms of getting things done politically. Like, you know, right now the new status quo, even though people always try to say this is not the new normal, don't let this be the new normal. Well, this is the new normal. Right. We are used to having a president who is corrupt, who's a liar, who's a alleged sexual assault, sexual abuser rather, and nothing really is shaking up this collective consciousness enough to actually move people into action on the side of the aisle that action has to come from, at least until November.
Well, that's the question. I mean, do you think that there is look, yes, until November, and I think there's a great two-step process happening right now. There's people like, obviously Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Connie-Ella Ng, Watud in Massachusetts. I'd add her to the mix. There's a lot of great people running really good democratic, socialist, and progressive insurgencies. And I think that process inside the Democratic Party, as I've actually said for a long time, it's happening. It's in process, and we're getting some great results, and also we're going to lose some battles as well. But it's happening, and then on top of that, I mean, I guess this kind of basic stance has been mine for a long time, and I would say, doubly so in this cycle. First, the first part is wage these insurgencies, and the second part is you need to give Democrats control of at least one body of government. It's just non-negotiable. It's essential. Everybody needs to, and you can pick your degrees of engagement, right? Like not everybody needs to volunteer and work for campaigns and all of that, but everybody needs to register and vote and get Democrats in the Senate and House into office in November. It's simply imperative. But besides that, I mean, to me, it's like, to the extent these things could have any benefit, it's on creating heat for procedural questions around for, far-right Democrats and for what I call the sanctimony caucus in the Senate, for things like Brett Kavanaugh. Like, okay, you're not worried about this guy, handing America to corporations, getting rid of women's rights to choose, but how can you go out and make this big show about being concerned about how uncouth Trump is when you enable this every day? And so I just think this type of thing is just purely based on that margin, if that makes sense.
I mean, I'm piecing that together. So you're basically saying
I'm saying if you
how complicit,
if you use a story like this to tell people like Joe Manchin on one hand and say Susan Collins, or I mean particularly actually like Jeff Flake on the other, whatever else, like this isn't about ideology. Of course, this isn't about having any concerns about the actual what this will do to millions of Americans, but it does have to do with, you can't on one hand, particularly that's why I call the Republican sanctimony caucus. John McCain, Jeff Flake, Susan Collins could today say, we are exactly where we've been politically all along, but we are so concerned about the questions of corruption and collusion and the just sort of daily un-Americanness, whatever language they want to use, of this administration, that we're going to become independents and caucus with Democrats and slow up the process because we care about a bigger principle here. Now, I don't think they'll ever do that, but I'm saying that's a way for us to put this stuff on the table, because either to expose their hypocrisy or to put pressure on them to actually do something instead of just tweets and boring speeches.
Yeah, no, okay, I get it. So I agree. They are emboldening this. They are empowering this. They are the linchpins, right? None of this actually goes forward in terms of Donald Trump's agenda without those core votes that, quite frankly, none of his agenda could get across without some of those votes, and particularly with this justice nomination. So I think that's a critical approach that not many people have been pushing. What you just said, like actually calling them to become independent and caucus with the Democrats, or just become independent and oppose Donald Trump on some critical issues. But ultimately, if you look at the approval ratings of Donald Trump in the Republican circles, I mean, they do that at their peril, because Republicans support the madness that's happening right now in our country.
And that leads me to, and does that in any way surprise you in any way, shape, or form?
No, not at all. That's why I didn't even have a follow-up statement to it, because that makes total sense. That's where they've been. I mean, this is an inevitable outgrowth of how hyper-partisan, particularly Republicans, have been. People try to draw that false equivalence between Democrats and Republicans all getting becoming more hyper partisan. But the fact of the matter is that what we're fighting is an asymmetrical fight. We haven't faced a partisan contingency like the Republican Party. I mean, they've gone so far down the deep end that that it totally makes sense that they would support someone who is Donald Trump.
Yeah, and that we can also look and find any number of precursors for this, right? I mean, with one hand, we can go all the way back. Yep. I did a show on last week on Jesse Helms and the invention of the modern Republican Party. We could look at Joe Arpaio's, terrorism in Arizona. We could look at Rudy Giuliani's regime in New York City. This not to mention Gingrich, not to mention, frankly, Ryan and Romney, even if they try to put a friendlier face on it. This is republicanism.
This absolutely is. I mean, go back to 2000 with the Supreme Court decision. Right. This one-off decision that they've never done before, but now they've given us George W. Bush for president. And this is the type of hardball politics that Republicans have been playing for a very long time. The most inept part of this entire conversation, the most disgusting part of this conversation, is the fact that some Democrats still don't get it. Chuck Schumer still doesn't get it. Right. They've been playing hardball with this guy for almost 40 years, and he still thinks that there's a possibility of some type of bipartisanship solution.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a second, but just to really underline for people who don't remember or don't know, the Supreme Court in 2000 stopped a recount to fully tally the votes in Florida, which, by the way, subsequent reporting would have showed that Al Gore won a majority of. And the reasoning they used, and I kid you not, was that this process violated George W. Bush's civil rights. So they literally evoked the 14th Amendment and civil rights procedures, which they were gutting even then. And of course, that only accelerated years later with Roberts across the board for like actual people. They evoked it specifically in the person of George W. Bush, and then also explicitly wrote in the decision that this type of reasoning should not be applied to other situations. They literally, and this is not like that's what they did. There's no poetic license.
There's no exaggeration there.
Yes.
There's no hyperbole in anything that you just said.
That's what they did. And, that, if anything, should have been, as you say, I agree with you completely. I mean, that should have been the moment of, and this is what really gets me about Schumer is contrast him with Harry Reid. Harry Reid, conservative Democrat. We have very different policies on any number of things. But the guy, first of all, understood what Republicans were. He's said in interviews, like he's like, I begged President Obama in the beginning to listen to me about who he was dealing with. And he understood it was a knife fight. Yeah. The thing that's amazing about Chuck Schumer is when you have an ideology problem and a wussbaggery problem.
Go ahead and expound on that more.
It's like it's like, I mean, and this is, I mean, I'm very sick of relitigating 2016, but right. That was part of the big problem with Hillary was like, okay, even if you don't like my politics, I really know how to win and I know how to fight dirty. No, you don't. There might have been a contingent of politicians at some point, and Obama was probably the last of them, frankly, who had a ideological profile that did not fit the needs of the moment by any stretch of the imagination, but they actually knew how to play some hardball and win some fights now and again. And now you have a leadership which is both totally out of date ideologically and doesn't even understand, as a Harry Reid understood, you got to just ground and pound these guys.
Right. Well, what's odd? I mean, that's true about Obama in terms of his campaigning, but that wasn't true about him in office.
Yes, exactly right.
That's the most aggravating thing about his entire presidency was that what he did to Hillary Clinton, he didn't do to the Republican Party as a president.
Precisely.
If he had done that, I mean, we'd have a single payer by now, or at least a public option.
Or what? At least not lose 1,000 state races. At least have some governorships. At least have Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court.
Exactly. But you're right. We are dealing with people who are both ideologically out of step and have no collective spine between the entire lot of them.
So do you have the optimism though? I mean, I don't know if I have optimism, but I sort of don't. I don't think it's static. I mean, I think it's happening. Like at least the fight is happening right now with the Democratic Party.
No, I have a lot of hope for the Democratic Party, particularly because of it's not all resting on Ocasio-Cortez, but what she kind of represents, a new wave and the potential of bringing an entirely new life to the Democratic Party at the highest levels of the Democratic Party. We're not talking about someone who's a rising star in the party. She is the star of the party at this point, and so quickly. So the potential is there for more people to do that. And what we have have to be careful of as leftists is that we don't sabotage this moment by saying that she's not socialist enough.
Right.
Well, you know what? She's socialist enough for me right now. You know, she's the best thing that we've got next to Bernie Sanders, or right next to Bernie Sanders. Pretty much the same thing, but I had to just be careful for the audience. But the point is that if we look at her and we think that she's not enough, and that we think the best option is for us to not participate, then we would do what so many leftists have done. We will sabotage our own potential for power. And this is the closest thing that we've gotten. So we need to push even harder for more people. You know, don't let her be a star alone, because there's so many more talented leftists who are just waiting for their opportunity to get on the national stage. I think we should seize it. You know, in terms of just the Democratic Party as a whole, we don't need to put them in. You know, we have to wait to 2020 before they get the White House. So that's plenty of time for us to actually put people in place so that when Democrats do get into power, they actually make decisions that matter. They do it from a ideologically consistent perspective of what the country is looking for at the moment, as well as with a backbone and with a spine to do and to undo some of the things that Donald Trump has done. Can you imagine getting a mealy-mouthed, soft-spoken Democrat to become president after Donald Trump, who wants to go back to bipartisanship? I just can't. I couldn't stomach the thought of that. We need a fighter who's going to come in and fight like hell to undo all the madness that Donald Trump has done over the last few years.
And get what needs to be done, what already needed to be done to address all the pre-existing crises.
Exactly.
And I think the other thing, too, that also, to me, and we touched on this yesterday, look, not only, I think, again, nobody's above, this is the same principle of Bernie. I think Bernie Sanders is great. I am still a defender of him against, I think, just any number of, frankly, just baseless attacks. At the same time, I'm totally willing to have, a fair and smart critique to help him get better. Same principle applies to Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
But the thing is it's like, if you want Ocasio-Cortez to be as great as she can be, if you want Bernie to be as great as he can be, if you also want other people don't have the same profile but have actually been really good as well. I'm thinking of a Barbara Lee as an example, who I really want to get into House leadership. Then what you need to do is get Kaniela Ng in there, get other candidates in there so that they're part of a pack and a tribe. That's the context by which they get better and better.
I mean, people understand this intuitively, right? Because you do the same thing on Twitter, right? Leftism is growing because we have a tribe now, right? Socialism is growing because we have a tribe. Marxist-Leninism is growing because they have a tribe. It makes total sense. But what is happening instead is that people are they're tearing down the potential that we have simply because they aren't this particular candidate isn't as perfect as they need them to be, or because of the intellectual thing to do now, or the pseudo-intellectual thing to do now, is to be a critic of the Democratic Party instead of trying to actually change the Democratic Party. People see more value, social value online, to just be a critic of the Democratic Party without doing anything to replace the Democratic Party from within or from without, for that matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I think across the board for all this stuff, we need strikes, we need protests, we need occupations, we need, I would love to see, and I've talked with some people in DSA about it. I'm excited. I would love to see DSA policy groups start putting out practical roadmaps.
Yes.
Like, how do we nationalize the oil and fossil fuel industry within the next 5 to 6 years? How do we nationalize companies like Google? Because I think actually it is a real concern with DSA specifically. It's like, okay, take the win that Medicare for All is becoming a mainstream position and keep pushing like hell on it, because even if it's mainstream, the most powerful forces in society are still going to fight it, or fight against it.
Yeah.
But then the way I think that you really keep distinguishing a DSA is, including, of course, grassroots things for things like renter and tenants' rights in a place like New York City. But then it's also to start putting out, like, hey, that's awesome. So glad that Kristen Gillibrand and Cory Booker and people like that have caught up on postal banking and these types of really great things. Well, we have a plan that would make, Exxon completely government taken over in 6 years and redistributed as a commons. What's your thoughts on that? And by the way, and there's another way for Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez and real left to keep proving their bona fides. And I think obviously in their case, I think they want to go there anyways. But I think that's how you and then the other dynamic that's emerging that I'd like your thoughts on too, which I actually take as encouraging, is there's been some articles that have come out on Elizabeth Warren's in a bit of a different category because she might run for president, but specifically Jeff Merkley and Brian Schatz, who to me, that's another sign of a win, because they're liberal progressives in a positive sense, not our politics. We're to the left of them, but they have some very genuine and serious commitments. Merkley was out of the gate on the ICE kidnappings. Schatz has produced serious proposals on college, on climate. They're both signed up for Medicare for All. Merkley endorsed Sanders. And their goals are to get Senate leadership positions as people that can synthesize the Democratic caucus, but from the left, not as corporate wussbags.
I love it. That's the hope. I mean, there's obviously going to have to be a leadership change because what's been happening is not tenable, right? The leadership that we have, and it has to come from a leftist perspective, but we have to be reasonable about how far the next left leadership is, right? So I think that's a reasonable step in the right direction. Obviously, we want to go even further left in the long run. But we're not going to have Che lead us in the Senate in the next 2 or 3 years. But we can move in the right direction because we can't stay with what we have. And if we don't put this goes back to what you said. Give them a squad. Give them a tribe there. Because without that, there is no left leadership in the Senate or the House, particularly. And so this is all the more reason we have to engage in this political system. I mean, more now more than ever.
And by the way, I just want to add, we'll pivot in a second, but actually I should add, frankly, and I interviewed both Allison Hartson and Kevin De Leon on Michael Brooks' show. And of course, I was, much closer to Hartson in terms of politics, but I would add that to the mix. You have a choice now between, a solid center-left guy who's got some good instincts, who came around to the right position on ICE, who's been serious about climate and expanding healthcare and immigrants' rights, versus a far-right national security Democrat. Vote for Kevin De Leon in California. Like, that is a tangible improvement right there. If you replace a Kevin De Leon with a Dianne Feinstein, it doesn't always have to be. That isn't as exciting as Ocasio-Cortez or Caniella. No. That's my politics, but it's a real improvement.
Right. But the thing is we've intellectualized disenfranchising ourselves. That's right. Honestly where we are in terms of the left. We're actually there in the black community as well. It's the intellectual thing to do to abstain from participating in this, and particularly from an incrementalist perspective, right? If you're talking incrementalism, then you're just as bad as a corporate neoliberal shill. Right. And that is the perfect formula to keep you out of power in perpetuity.
I agree completely. I want to touch on this tariff stuff for a minute with Trump. 2 parts of it that I want your thoughts on. One, we saw the big threat with China. Then China sort of soothed him by giving a company he has in Indonesia a deal, which is like peak Trump. And then, with the Europeans, it basically was, much lower stakes, but essentially the same as North Korea. A bunch of dramas created, and then they sit and him and Juncker announce an agreement, which is really just aspirations. It's like, one day we'll have this tariff-free relationship. But it does strike me, trade is particularly an area, though, where the frame that, oh my God, look at what Donald Trump is doing, is profoundly insufficient. Trade has always been, particularly in modern era, particularly under WTO rules, unfortunately, that is an area of real, at the presidential executive level, bipartisan consensus on writing the rules of the road in favor of corporations and in ways that are incredibly harmful to labor, to the environment, to public health across the board. Even this Trump breastfeeding thing at the UN, I'm sorry, yes, it's totally disgusting, but no, Obama, Bush, and Clinton did very similar things, including, in the late 90s, the Clinton administration's approach to generic AIDS drugs in South Africa was one of the most moral obscenities you could imagine. And I actually think for that Midwest strategy, that's another area where Democrats are going to really need to come up with, and the grassroots is going to really need to come up with what does an actual fair trade system look like?
I was reading the post, the article by Zach Carter in Huffington Post, and he was as he was expounding on the problem. It's obviously these things pre-existed Donald Trump. I mean, you said as much just now. But Donald Trump is taking a hatchet to the problem that really needs precision in terms of how do we unravel what has become free trade on the international stage, this interdependency that we have between nations. How do we unravel that to something that is fair trade, and how do we do it in a way that does not destroy more than it does any good? Donald Trump is not out to do anything good here.
Of course.
Yes, we do need fair trade, and I think that is the framing that we should have this conversation in. I think we should seize on the opportunity that Donald Trump is creating by bringing light to the problems of this, by trying to bring a hatchet job to this. He is bringing a lot of light to the problem. But we should seize upon that to do the right thing. And I think that's the case in so many things that Donald Trump does. He stumbles onto the right area for the wrong reason.
Right.
And he becomes this idiot, like a bull in a china shop, just destroying things. But in reality, there's some things about the china shop that we actually need to fix. And I think if we don't seize the opportunity to make substantive changes for the good, then we will allow Donald Trump to do all of the damage without anything good coming from it.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And I think that this also underlines, I know we've talked about this before, but just how awful the media coverage was that drew this lazy symmetry between Sanders and Trump. And they would say, these guys are both upset at the system and they're both critical of trade agreements. Bernie Sanders was talking about changing trade agreements to basically create labor solidarity and enhance conditions.
Right.
And to the extent that Trump, and people really need to remember this, to the extent he was ever specific about it, was saying things like Americans make too much money.
Yeah, honestly, I honestly forgot that he said that.
Do you remember that?
I recall it now, but wow. Is the same thing with any of the trade deals that he's talking about. He's not talking about fixing the problem that we have with the system. He's talking about fixing the problem that he sees with the system. And you have to realize who Donald Trump is. He is a capitalist. I mean, he is a neoliberal, right, from that perspective. So, if you think he's trying to fix something, with the TPO, the things that he's trying to fix are not the problems that we have with the system, right? He's doing favors. It's amazing how many of the things that he does are for personal favors for people he knows. Like he'll make changes to the entire system for one individual. Well, just because he's addressing trade doesn't mean he's addressing it from the perspective that we as leftists want him to address it. And so I think that is the danger, both in terms of the media's laziness in their reporting, but also with how he lulled some people. I don't know what percentage it was, but some people were lulled into supporting him because he had the language of a populist. Right. In actuality, he's as much a capitalist as anybody else in the system.
That's exactly right. And I think that also illustrates the other, one good way of telling the difference between an actual, genuine populist, progressive, or socialist analysis versus the pseudo-populist, far-right reactionary, and in fact, hyper-corrupt capitalist that you're talking about is what order of thing are we talking about, right? Like Brexit, obviously, I think is, it's pound for pound. I get that there's a left critique of the EU, which I find credible, but Brexit's a bad idea. But the big thing is somebody going to you and saying that there is a problem that affects the UK, staying on that, and the whole European Union, and that problem is the EU, the euro as a currency was designed in a way that followed the rules of the gold standard, which are reactionary, which are right-leaning in terms of monetary policy. There's a problem in terms of austerity. There is a capitalist problem that has affected the UK in terms of stagnation, massive inequality, and all of the problems we have across the world in a deregulated neoliberal environment. And that's the problem. And if somebody says to you, even when they're saying things and making noises about things that are real, inequality, wage stagnation, insecurity, and then they go, and it's that bureaucracy, and we could solve it by this second order thing. That's always the tip off. I mean, sometimes obviously it's as blatant as, the reason is because of, immigrants or whatever, and the racism is obvious. But even when they're not going there explicitly, if they're talking about something that isn't just like capitalists writ large, like capital's a problem. It isn't a specific problem because of the Eurozone rules. It's a problem because it's a problem.
It's a problem, right?
Right. And you got to catch that.
Yeah, and I would hope those of us, this is why, if I could just kind of be cliche here, this is why independent media is so important, right? Yeah. This is why your show is important. This is why what all of us do is important, is because we have to translate these things. It's not that the people can't do it on their own. They're totally capable of doing this. But you know what? When you're trapped in this system, you really may not have enough time to really delineate the difference between what this particular politician is saying as a critique of capitalism or critique of our current system, and what this politician is saying is a true critique of capitalism, as a true way of getting class solidarity, international class solidarity, right? And so it's important that we have these conversations, because it's never going to happen on mainstream media. I don't know in our lifetime if it will ever happen on television or in the mainstream news. But it's so critical because the sleight of hand is so insidious. Donald Trump mastered it. I don't even think he meant to master it, but he understood that if he could communicate in the language of populism, in the tone of populism, he can actually exacerbate the problem of the people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I just want to touch on Brazil with you briefly. People know that obviously on both my show and Majority Report, I've been covering this a lot. And there's a letter, and this also, I think, again, actually underlines our earlier point about who you get into Congress. But 29 Congress people signed a letter, including Bernie Sanders, Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters, Keith Ellison. Yep. It was organized by Mark Pocan, who's actually also a good progressive from Wisconsin, who helped organize against TPP. And it not only calls denounces the quote-unquote highly questionable and politicized imprisonment of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. It also states that the fight against corruption should not be used to justify the persecution of political opponents or denying them the right to participate in free elections. Of course, Lula leads in elections, even though he's been imprisoned on very flimsy evidence for several months. The person second to him in the elections is a quite literal fascist, someone who's talked about restoring military rule in Brazil. And the letter also talks about the austerity regime of Michel Temer right now, which came into office through removing Dilma Rousseff from office and is using brutal austerity and basically reversing all of the social gains of the Lula government, which took 40 million people out of poverty. And I also want to just add major cloud on Obama and Kerry here, because this was heating up really in 2014, 2015, and they did nothing in terms of looking at a very dangerous, very politicized situation in Brazil, which was clearly a tool of oligarchs to reassert control. And I just want your thoughts on this, I guess, both from a U.S. and Brazil perspective. I know we've chatted about it off mic.
Yeah, particularly from the U.S. perspective, I think this is why you can't minimize the importance of another voice, right? Because we would have seen participation from the opposite side for purposes of oligarchy, for the purposes of corporatism across global corporatism. But now we have voices that are speaking out on the issue that, quite frankly, I'm surprised that we got that. Not because of the people who were on the letter. Like, the letter was signed Maxine Waters, Barbara Lee, like you said, Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna. I expect that from those people, but to have it organized and presented to actually be participating on an international stage in a positive way, right? The United States can have the positive impact that we should have had all along. That you can't minimize the importance of having every individual leftist voice that we can get into Washington, D.C. From the Brazil perspective, it's I'm not an expert. I mean, I guess none of us are experts on these fields, but just really specifically the opportunity for power to change and to control that next step. Like this is a very important decision. This is a very important election. And what happens after this, this is the pivotal moment, right? And so the ability for people in power to pull the chains of power, to maintain power, we can't minimize how important that is and look at that as a model of what could potentially happen in other nations. And so this is like something we've seen historically. It's like a playbook that people in power who want to control it. And we're not talking about individual people so much as regimes, right? The right-leaning regime wants to remain in power. And so of course it's going to do everything it can to maintain that power, even if it means the violation of human rights, civil rights, and anything else. So, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have on that. Man.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely, and I also just think it's also another important thing to look at. It's another rhetoric to be very mindful of. Like AMLO has an anti-corruption campaign which is connected with the problems of inequality and oligarchy in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
In Brazil, a generic campaign about corruption, which, by the way, corruption is an issue that the current president who's implementing austerity is literally on tape talking about bribing people. And there's a very clean case you can make that to the extent that the Workers' Party and even Lula himself, although there's been, as I say, the evidence against him is would not pass muster with any kind of rigorous process, but that they actually acquiesce to a degree of participation in corruption because that's the only way you can acquire any kind of power in Brazil. In fact, that very similar, in fact, to the type of people who make a kind of realistic argument about some of the compromises that somebody like Obama made. And frankly, if we're being real, Lula certainly delivered a lot more for people in poverty than Obama did here. But that being said, I think that it's another good example that just, of course, anti-corruption's an important issue, and of course it matters a lot if you believe in left politics and government democracy. But at the same time, it's another thing that it doesn't float in space by itself. And if it isn't connected to a broader critique and understanding of politics, power, and things, by the way, that we don't call corrupt but are innately corrupt, like oligarchs controlling all of a country's resources, then it's going to not only not address the problems, it's going to be harnessed to do what they're doing to Lula specifically, but it also, implement austerity, this assassination of Marielle Franco, which the letter also represents. It's going to be used in a very corrupted way, ironically, to actually really just reassert oligarchy, which is what's happening in Brazil.
Well, and that is the power of it, though, right? Yeah. You give a simple phrase like corruption, and it neutralizes people who otherwise would oppose you, and notwithstanding the fact that the current regime is corrupt, right? But this is the importance of communication. This is the importance of being able to break that barrier of people who see the word corruption and then they either fall out of the conversation, they become disillusioned, and they don't fight anymore. But then the reality is that the people who are claiming corruption are corrupt themselves, and they're claiming corruption to maintain their corruption. It's like it's a sleight of hand that is happening in the United States every single day, for that matter. But if people don't understand the game, if people don't understand the spin, then they could become demoralized and the fight diminishes. And that's what we have to be able to do, help them to do, at least here in the United States, is to understand the game that's being played on us and to not let it demoralize us because they are doing exactly. I mean, they're master propagandists. That's all I have to say. They're master propagandists globally.
One of the best people for helping you understand the game that is being played is my friend Benjamin Dixon, and you can find his work at The Benjamin Dixon Show. There's going to be a link, of course, to his show page, and you can find him on Twitter. Indispensable source. Ben Dixon, thanks as always.
Hey, Mike, it's always a pleasure, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I should say, I just heard the Boston DSA does have a plan to nationalize. Nationalize. Oh, what was it?
Oil or tech?
National Grid.
Awesome.
It's a campaign to
That's
nationalize
exactly
National
what we
Grid.
need. That's exact, and I want to see that across a whole suite of policy areas, a whole suite of policy areas.
Oh, for sure.
That would be amazing. And that's another way when you talk about making sure that the DSA stays as a distinctly socialist and radical one, you start doing that by continuing to put policies on the table that continue to push the envelope for democratizing the economy.
For sure.
All right. Can you guys vamp for 1 second? I'm going to call Ben. We have you. Oh, you're right. All right. All right. We will.
Good vamp.
No, we'll go to music. That should be fine. All right. We will be right back with Ben Mankiewicz from Turner Classic Movies and the Young Turks.
Chronics are where you say, hey. Okay.
Who knows? I just go where the trade wind blows, sending love to my friends and foes. And I suppose I'm pleased to be chilling in the West Indies. I provide all my wants and needs. I got the sunshine, rivers and trees.
When me see Jah, me see a way. Drastically straight from hypocrisy, I say, hey. Every man to them own a philosophy. I live the proper way and then me read a chapter daily. Monday in a city hungry and no eat. And food they down a country just a drop off of the tree then. You see say poverty no real then. Is what the reason revealing.
Who knows? I just go where the trade wind blows, sending love to my friends and foes. And I suppose I'm pleased to be chilling in the West Indies. I provide all my wants and needs. I got the sunshine, rivers and trees, green leaves, yeah.
When the rain pits up on the roof, herb just a steam pepper pot on the stew. Life is a dream if you got gratitude. So go tell the regime them can't stop what we do now. Information you think on your own, or else you're a slave to the things that you know. What do you know if you learn every day? So be careful of things where you say.
Who knows? I just go where the trade wind blows, sending love to my friends and foes. And I suppose I'm pleased to be chilling in the West Indies. I provide all my wants and needs. I got the sunshine, rivers and trees, green leaves.
Africa in our soul, but a Jah in our heart. It is of importance for I and I gather. If we cannot show now a balance that we had, how do we propose then to carry it abroad? Cannot go to Ethiopia and you not have a plan. The building of a nation and a helper on. Every one a lover, one a man is just a man. It shall be a coronation when we land.
Who knows? I just go where the trade wind blows, sending love to my friends and foes. And I suppose I'm pleased to be chilling in the West Indies. I provide all my wants and needs. I got the sunshine, rivers and trees, green leaves.
Chronics and Protege, who knows? Welcome back to the Majority Report. Joining us now is Ben Mankiewicz. He's a host at Turner Classic Movies, co-host of the Young Turks. Ben, thanks for being here.
Michael, how are you?
Doing great, man. How are you?
I'm well. I'm on vacation in the Poconos.
In the Poconos, huh?
Yeah.
Have you been there
where
before?
sort of my wife kind of grew up. It's a complicated place, the Poconos, but it's interesting.
I've never been, actually.
Yeah, it's fine. You'll be okay. But if you have to go, it's okay. It's all right. Now, actually, some of it is...
Is there any good nosh there?
There is not any good nosh.
There's no good nosh.
Did you go to one of those...
you have to eat at the club.
What did you say?
You have to eat at the club.
What's the club?
The golf and tennis and pool club. And that is not an experience that I'm entirely comfortable
with. Wait, will you talk about that, and particularly the levels of anti-Semitism you experienced?
Well, first of all, the people here in this town are actually pretty great, and but there is a sort of, the Poconos, some of it was just devastated by the economic crash in 2007, and has just not recovered.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of abject poverty, surrounded by not really opulence, but certainly people from New York and Philadelphia who have second homes here. But this place is so remote that really not the only restaurant, but sort of the restaurant people end up going to is the place at the golf and tennis club. These are my wife's friends, and they're good people, and there are plenty of liberals out here. But but on the 4th of July, I was here earlier in the first week of July, and I just came back to see my wife and daughter and bring them all back to L.A. with me. And
I like it's like Escape from the Poconos with the Mankiewiczes. I went back to get them back to L.A.
I have to ask, were you staying at one of those love hotels with a heart-shaped hot tub?
The Hotel Madonna. I've had a meal at the Hotel Madonna.
Nice.
That's actually, I've got accused. That's in San Luis Obispo. No, but there are those places here. No, of course, there's plenty. No, we rented a house. We did the amount of money you end up paying for a house here it doesn't have a pool, that bothered me. But the whole thing bothered me. But nonetheless, that's not the point. Let's continue on.
The whole thing bothered you.
No.
I love it.
So on the 4th of July, there's this great, fabulous picnic, and there's fireworks, and they do an egg toss, and they do a balloon toss, and all these sort of fun, and all these kids are there, and it's great. Now, you do have a moment where you look around and you think, if in 1938, outside Berchtesgaden, Hitler had said, guys, let's get all our families together, and we'll have a big picnic, and we'll play a bunch of games, the crowd would have looked similar. That was sort of my takeaway.
Did you share that? Did you share that with people?
I did. Which they were all they're aware of what this. But anyway, but the fact
they gave
is,
you some Midwest charm. They were just like, "Oh, that's true. It would be like Hitler. Yeah, it's a good joke."
No, and it's so.
And then you left, and you're like, "That Jew TV bastard."
No, they're not. The great thing is that there is a little flashback to a simpler time. Like a bunch of parents here won't know where their kids are. And they'll be like, oh, they're over at the Stoffingtons having. I did just pick a very German name, but they're over at somebody else's house. She's feeding them dinner. Like kids wander around.
I like that. They're over at the Waffen SS aftercare program.
All right. Yeah, this was a mistake. Thankfully, this isn't going public, so it'll be fine.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure nobody from the Poconos.
My wife will be like, "Hey, can I listen to your thing?" I'm like, "No. It was a practice."
Oh, come on!
Yeah.
Of course she can watch. I've enjoyed. I got the permission to hang out with her once. She's very cool.
It's good. It's a fun place to be, and my daughter's having a great time.
Oh, that's awesome. We did have Matt. I don't know if you can play sound. We did have that. Okay, you need a minute. All right, we're gonna get you. I do want to play some great Bill O'Reilly sound of his new career, but before we get there, there was a really funny, maybe I shouldn't say this is funny, but whatever. It was an objectively funny piece about Kimberly Guilfoyle that dropped today in Huffington Post. And
yes, I read it. Yeah.
Yes. And a couple of things about this. First, her team obviously tried to do, a week or two ago or whenever it was, she wasn't pushed, she walked. And they hit her on background with a piece today that was, hilarious, disgusting, and also just really bizarre, because it was I
agree.
Yeah. I have a take on it I want to ask you about, but give me your initial reactions to the piece first.
Well, I didn't take it as initially, partly because it's Yasser Ali, and he's so unbelievably patched in, the reporter, with sort of the Me Too movement and having people open up to him. So there were 21 sources he had. I didn't see it as a Fox pushback, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh, all right. It's a lot of people to be involved in a pushback, which suggests that some may have sort of approached him authentically, and he is the place where people would go to.
Right.
That said, I had a number of different reactions. One of them was, on one level, until I read the part about her yelling at the hair and makeup people, which, again, it just blows my mind that anybody would ever do that
so
at
gross.
Any point.
It's so gross.
Yeah, you don't
so
talk
gross.
to these people who are there to serve you and make you look better.
Right.
You just be grateful every second that job exists for somebody to help you look better. But
yes.
So, but I thought she, showed pictures of male genitalia. So says the story. This is a woman who tried to play along in the culture at Fox.
And had you guess, the thing was that she would show a picture and then she would try to have you guess which man it was.
That does sound like, I'll be honest, that sounds like a fun game.
That does sound like kind of a fun game, actually. I was like, I definitely read the piece, and I was like, if she wasn't such a totally horrible person, in some ways she sounds pretty fun to hang out with.
But this is a woman who tried to be one of the boys, and then even that came back and bit her. So on that sense, I had sympathy. Like, she played the game. Right now, playing the game by calling up and saying when Ailes was still there, are you on Team Roger or Team Gretchen for Gretchen Carlson? That is not trying to play along. That's sort of hideous and divisive. But I just imagine sort of being faced with a choice, which of course millions of women have had to, of like, do I say, hey, enough of this crap? Or do I, hey, okay, great, fine, let's go drinking. I'll try to play golf. I'll talk about sex. I'll be the bawdy girl who talks about sex, and then that comes back to bite her. That seems
Sorry?
I said that seems a little unfair to me.
Right.
That comes back to bite her after she tries to play along and be bawdy.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, I kind of thought to myself, what was funny about this, I mean, there's sort of like three things. I mean, one is a great reminder that like up until 2016, this place was like essentially a global sexual harassment ring. And, and she's, and I'm also reminded, I don't remember what article it was in. I think it was something that either Gretchen Carlson said in her book or Megyn Kelly, but that, Ailes sort of, and by the way, and he said this, I mean, just to like fully get the picture, it wasn't like he said this with like kind of I pictured sort of like a gross smile on his face. I guess, I don't know what other way you could picture Roger Ailes smiling, but he supposedly called, Kimberly Guilfoyle a Puerto Rican whore, quote unquote. And in like she's one of us sort of thing. Right. And even just having that, all of that in background. I mean, just the implications of that statement on so many levels and how grotesque that is. And the fact, so you have Fox till 2016, raw sexual harassment culture. Then you have this, and then the Kimberly Guilfoyle, I think you're right. I think, I think especially, as you said, when it comes to like terrorizing the assistants, I mean, that's just a sign of a bad person. I just don't, you can't convince, I can get into a fair amount of moral relativity, but when you're talking about somebody who, is in a situation like that, if you're bullying somebody who's just objectively lower on the totem pole, is just there to assist you, you're a bad person. There's no other way of getting around it. And at the same time, right, she was trying to play in the boys club, and now she gets the shaft, which kind of the third part of it, which is bizarre to me, which is like, okay, I guess Fox News, it's like, no, now we're going to be this modern 21st century environment where you can't like sexually terrorize women anymore. You can't say overtly racist things to black people in IT or whatever the hell else was going on there. And then at the same time, we're still the main propaganda network for a overtly misogynist white supremacy based administration. But it's just internally now, now we're going to be really nice and PC. And it's like, wow, that's a bizarre contradiction.
Right. We can, look, it's a complicated world, and I suppose we should give Fox credit and Murdoch credit for putting a stop to the thing that I imagine it didn't occur to him he even had to stop for 20 years of being this sort of factory of sexual harassment. But it's still Fox, and that's still an enormously profitable business right now to be the propaganda arm of the Trump administration.
And I think it's also, and I think, obviously in the Trump era, Alex Jones and all these other things are incredibly important, and they're part of the Republican brain trust. But Fox News is still, that's still the Death Star, as it were.
Oh, no question. Yeah. I mean, Alex Jones is nothing compared to Fox News. I mean, Alex Jones is a sad day for him. 30 days off of Facebook, right? No Alex Jones.
Oh, right. I heard about that. Know. Yeah, no Alex Jones. I guess I do get somewhat, I think, because I don't trust the editorial sophistication of Facebook. Whenever I hear that, I mean, great. So, screw Alex Jones. He's a menace, although he is a talented broadcaster, I hate to admit. But, I get concerned, I guess, about, like, is that process going to really draw smart distinctions about what is and is not credible content? Because I remember.
I mean, Alex Jones should be banned from Facebook.
I think Alex Jones specifically should. I agree. I buy that totally. But I remember when this started happening, there was a good piece. I forget where it was, but it sort of, it was basically making the point that, well, I'll give you a direct example. And fortunately, I mean, this ended up being fine. But, recently on Michael Brooks' show, I did a long format show with Anthony LaPaye, who's a executive producer and showrunner for this history of the drug war in America on which I think was on the History Channel. It was actually a really smart and very well reported series, and we did a series, the illicit history of opioids, everything from the corporate malfeasance to Chapo's role in it to failure in governmental policy, and this stuff, It implicates policymakers, American corporations, the pharma industry, and there's nothing conspiratorial about it, right? But I could see if it, an algorithm that's just looking for, CIA complicit in, trafficking out of Nicaragua in the 80s. Well, that's just true. But if you're just looking, if you're just using a metric that says like anything, maybe that's the same metric that says, that the government has a moon child molestation base or whatever the hell else goes on.
Well, it lacks the. It's true and important. I love it. I will instantly start watching that. But
right.
But it's not that different than James Clapper lied to Congress.
Yeah.
Therefore, everything anyone in intelligence says must be dismissed out of hand. Like, when did you start listening? I'm like, yeah, I got it. I must say, although he did unquestionably lie to Congress, I don't suspect the Director of National Intelligence was going to reveal a program that they were doing that was almost certainly illegal, and certainly they wanted to keep quiet in an open session of Congress. Like, and I don't instantly sounds like I'm making excuses for him. I just mean, like, that is not the world we live in, where he goes, yeah, you got us. Good question, man. We're collecting bulk data.
Fucking Wyden, man. He nailed it.
I was so hoping you weren't going to ask that, Ronnie. Yeah.
Wyden, he just turns into Will Ferrell.
Right.
Why did you ask that question? Well, or as I always say in these conversations, the American intelligence services lie frequently. And other intelligence services lie? All of them.
Yeah, all of them. Right. That does not mean that we lose the ability to assess their information as credible or not every time they speak it. Anyway, but that's a whole
indeed.
So, I hear you.
Well, there's always a pre and a post critique to everything. But I think I just think the other thing I would want to put on the table too was also that we covered this yesterday, but Fox News putting out that statement that they stand in solidarity with the CNN reporter who was kicked out for asking the Michael Cohen question. That press release is put out in the same day that Lou Dobbs gets, himself into a lather about it's time to treat the president with respect, and if you don't, there are consequences, which is like literally authoritarian sentiment, right? Like, I mean, it's like
because he lacks the talent of Sean Hannity or Bill O'Reilly. You mentioned Alex Jones is a good broadcaster, and I agree with that. I thought O'Reilly was a great broadcaster.
Well, we're going to get to him in a second.
But the Lou Dobbs isn't.
No.
And therefore sort of floats under the radar, but he is as bad or worse than Hannity and more alarming in many ways.
Right.
And that hair color is unidentifiable anywhere in the color spectrum, too. He's like 96 years old and has that color hair.
Yeah, it's like, welcome back. The only good thing that black people ever did was Red Fox gave me a suggestion for this hair color. Now here's a fucking Mexican segment. All right, Ben, you say that Bill O'Reilly was a great commentator, and was a great broadcaster. Excuse me, good broadcaster. I remember a joke. I don't remember who told it, but it wasn't me. I wish I could give somebody credit. They said, I hate all of them, but Bill O'Reilly is talented. Sean Hannity looks like a gym teacher who won a raffle to get a TV show, which is a sentiment that I totally agree with. This is Bill O'Reilly now at BillO'Reilly.com. And I just want to play this clip. I want to see if you have any speculation about maybe anything, Bill O's state of mind is how I'll put it. And I also want to know if you're still going to stand by the great good broadcaster moniker after you hear this. Check this out. This is Bill O'Reilly talking about ICE polling.
All right, so there was a poll conducted by Pew. Pew's pretty good, PEW. And they asked people if they have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of ICE. All right. I love this. So, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. Do you have a favorable opinion of ICE? And it was 47% said no. No, we don't like ICE. 44, yes, we like. That's within the margin of error. So it's a tie. So half the Americans say, we like ICE. We need immigration enforcement. We need border patrol. We need it. And then 47% no, they're too mean. They're mean. Now, that's totally 100% media driven. 100%.
I would just like to say, I don't know if people's natural moral reactions to watching kids get kidnapped and then held hostage is just pure media drive. It might just be a basic moral sentiment getting activated. But
no, all the media. I had no opinion on kids being abducted by government agents until CNN, that liberal bastion CNN, told me to be outraged. So I would say Bill O'Reilly needed a producer and a scripted show to be a really good broadcaster, because that was bad. Not the sentiment. The sentiment was always bad, right? He's capable of relaying that sentiment on the old O'Reilly factor, but he would have done it in a far more skilled fashion. I'm not saying would have convinced people either. I just mean he has all the ability to take what someone said, turn it, twist it, throw it back to them in a way that makes them defensive and do it on the fly. There's a fair amount of skill in that, right? I mean, he used a very useful skill, and he used it for evil, but it was unquestionably a skill. That didn't really that didn't reflect it. And then, of course, the actual content of what he said is wrong. We protected the borders and had border enforcement before there was ICE. So we're not really, when we say disillusion, get rid of ICE, we're not really saying, and don't patrol the border at all. Just open it up. He's back to his normal tactics of sort of deliberately misleading. I don't know whether you know this about me, but for 3 or 4 years now, the best thing I've done, the best opinion I've had, was that ICE has the worst name ever, and that it is dangerous when we start giving cops with that kind of ability to enforce against weaker people a badass nickname. Like, not supposed to be cool, right? You're not supposed to be, I'm with ICE, right? No, I mean, if you want to change it to the Bureau of Border Enforcement, the BBE, that's not cool, and I could live with that. And I think that does send a message. I mean, again, it's propaganda. It's subtle, but we give these guys, these cops, these badass ICE T-shirts, and they give them a badass name, and then eventually they have too much power. So the issue isn't abolishing them; it's changing the name and reducing the power. And
in my case, I would certainly abolish ICE, but I also think there's a whole, look, one of the things that AMLO's promised to do in Mexico is demilitarize Mexico's border with Guatemala, and he basically said, "Look, we're not going to do your dirty work anymore." But to be really clear, there's a lot of steps in between here. Demilitarizing a border does not mean that you say, "Look, we're going to get in accordance with international law on refugees. We're not going to have an empowered independent agency to terrorize families across the country."
That's right.
And we're still going to, there's still a process that we could check your passport, look at what you're bringing into the country. None of this is necessitating, violence and militarism in any way, shape, or form. And it really is. This is also why. Obviously, I oppose things like NSA surveillance, just on the merits. I do not trust that agency with that level of that type of unaccountable power and monitoring. But the other argument that you would, people like me would make, and I never said Trump by name, but you would talk about, policies like the NSA or even like deportations under Obama, and you would say, all right, guys, let's stipulate for a minute that Barack Obama is the perfect Confucian ruler of the world, and he never makes a mistake, and he's never wrong, and obviously I could, even just me sort of vaguely criticizing him is super bad, which some people did get about Obama, just as other people, couldn't ever have a realistic analysis of Obama either that was fair to him, frankly. But, I would say, okay, what happens when none of these programs are codified or accountable or scaled back, whether it's drones or NSA or ICE, and you elect a total lunatic Republican president? And the only part of that sentiment that I was wrong about was, I didn't specifically predict what lunatic it would be until much later.
The level of lunacy was underestimated.
Right. It was like...
Right. Even in your worst case scenario, the level of lunacy was underestimated.
Right. I didn't say, hey, you see that orange face asshole who is fantasizing about fingering his daughter? One day he's going to be in charge of all of these programs.
Yeah, no, you're right, and the key is for all these things. I mean, look, there's you want realistically, right? Assuming that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is not going to be the president right away, right? She got to wait 7 years anyway, right?
I think she's got a shot down the road. Actually, she's got chops. But yes, you will be waiting.
By the way, she does have political skill. There's no question. So, but you want a policy where there are people in the room who are, I don't know, experts on immigration and immigration policy, and they need to have a voice in setting an administration policy. We know that doesn't exist here. We know that it's hardline immigration opponents and law enforcement. That's who makes up Trump's policy. That's it. Right? How much more money can I get? How many more guns can I get? What can I get? Can we get 10 tanks to patrol the border around El Paso? We'd love that. That will help. Right? Great, terrific. And there's nobody there to say, here's a breakdown of who's coming across and why they're coming across. Right? That policy doesn't exist. Now, obviously, we know that was far more likely to exist under Obama, but I don't really know whether it did. And certainly, Obama, at his lowest point in immigration, when he was, it should be said, because context is always relevant, desperate, as he always was, to make a deal. Right? So he got tough on immigration, and then thinking, hey, now these guys will make a deal with me. Never getting until year 6 of his presidency, you know what? They're not interested in making a deal with me.
Well, I think there's so much.
Going to.
There's so much in what you just said that I just totally agree with, because I think that it's like there's a couple of this. Okay, so one is it's what happens now is there's a certain contingent of people who, all they have is, oh my God, I miss Obama. And I'm sorry, it's just not good enough on any kind of assessment you could make, including for, the reasons you outlined, including just even Obama's own misconceptions about what was happening, and the fact that the hardline policies that Obama pursued, again, are not only innately wrong, but they also are a precursor to the catastrophe we're in now. And then on the flip side, when you draw a false equivalency between Obama and Trump, at this point, not only are you talking about difference in degree, you're talking about differences in kind. Because even the worst things that Obama did with regards to immigration, as you say, were part of a fundamentally wrong-headed triangulation effort to achieve a deal which would have benefited millions of people. This effort of this administration is to engineer a white electorate, both to appease white nationalists and for others who are, I don't think have the same ideological investments. They just see the terrain. Like, of course I want to suppress the vote. Of course I want to ethnically cleanse America because I want to win, and we're a white identity party. And that is a fundamental difference. I do think moving forward, though, what people should understand is that, Democrats can afford to pursue a very humane and progressive border policy, not just ethically, but politically, because I don't think, the people who thought Obama was weak on the border, it's because of his name and his skin color, not because of any reality of what happened at the border, right? It's all identity politics.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, toward the end, you had reasons to think that policy was that he was too lenient, not so much at the border, but on immigration in general, and creating the Dreamers, So there was.
But that's a hard right position. If you oppose the Dreamers, you're on the hard right. Right, that's not a moderate position. That's a hard right position.
No, right. Yeah. There are no right. Every Obama took literally he took there are a few liberal positions. He took and progressive positions. He took a gazillion moderate positions, and every one of them was categorized as crazed liberal from the right. So, again, the lesson which so many mainstream Democrats seem incapable of learning is it doesn't matter what you do. They're going to call you a communist. So do something
Precisely.
good.
Precisely. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. See, and this is, we are the perfect example, I think, of the liberal socialist tag team, Ben. I think we just nail it every time, frankly. And it's this kind of coalition that could win, along with a lot of Poconos humor. You're also, of course, the great host for Turner Classic Movies. And so you haven't seen Succession yet? We were texting about that.
No, I'm not. I've been 3 or 4 people in the last 5 days have berated me for not yet watching.
Wait, did Jank berate you? Of course, it's a great show.
Yeah. He's like, what's wrong with you? Why? I can't believe you are not watching this show.
I have to be honest with you. I was kind of shocked.
Yeah, no, I know. I just, because we stopped reviewing so many of these shows. I mean, obviously, we would have reviewed it, too, on our show, What the Flick, on the TYT.
I like What the Flick. I was actually...
So we should have anyway. I got you. We missed it. We'll get season.
I'm not
two.
a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. So I actually was kind of like, wow, I'm seeing this and Ben is not. That is very odd.
I watch a lot of television. I watch a lot of things, a lot of TV, a lot of movies in my life.
You know what's relaxing about Succession is that all of the characters are so unlikable that none of the stress of the show matters to you, because you're like, literally all these people could die in a jet crash and it would make no emotional impact on me. So you can just watch from this incredible emotional distance while they backstab each other, because it doesn't matter.
I'm a little like my father. My father always, he's a really smart, sophisticated guy, but any movie he ever saw, any TV show, he had trouble following things, as smart as he was. He didn't quite get how stories were told visually.
Right.
He always thinks whatever you're seeing happened right after the thing you just saw.
Ah, okay.
So if you mess with time at all, even like a couple of hours, he said, well, how do they not know where he is? He left the building. They have a guy. I'm like, Dad, no, this is them. Never mind, right? And God forbid they put anything up on the screen that put a date up. He'd be
That's
like, what does
awesome.
that mean? That means it's now 1943. But it was just 1980. I know. Now it's 1943. I don't know.
He's like, no, it's not.
And so no matter what, he felt like he had to have somebody to root for. And if there's nobody to root for, he wasn't into it.
Yeah, I kind of get that, actually. And I wonder, we've gone a little overboard maybe with the all right, enough of the moral conflict and nobody's clean. Like, I think Billions pulls that off because it does a good job at sort of making different people likable at different times, and a guy like so that kind of works. But I think maybe we've gone a little overboard with that.
No, the great thing about Billions, again, I think is that there are times when you hate both Giamatti and Damian Lewis, and then times when you're like, what happened here? I'm on Damian Lewis's side, and I don't understand what he's doing, and 2, I know it's morally corrupt, but somehow I'm into it. And then you root for these characters. I mean, there's like the guys like Dollar Bill. Like, I want a whole show about Dollar Bill managing his 2 families. That's the show I would watch.
That would be an awesome spin-off.
100 episodes of, and I figure one of his wives is jealous of the other, and the other one just doesn't care. And at one point she turns to him and says, like, don't talk to me like that. Who do you think I am, Rachel?
I'm the wife who doesn't care. I think, that's a great example, because on the show, I love that guy. In real life, I would literally send him to a work camp. So that's it.
Totally. I got you. That's exactly right.
But on the show, he's awesome. And when he smashed that guy's car, I almost clapped. If you know what scene I'm talking about.
I do, totally. Yeah.
The compliance officer's car, that was one of my favorite scenes in the whole show.
Yeah, that guy's in the guy whose car he slammed is also in Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, I could see that. I haven't watched Handmaid's Tale because I just can't take more negativity, but I believe it.
You'd be into it.
I buy it.
You can handle it.
I believe it.
You're a grown-up. You can handle it.
You're a grown-up. You can handle it. All right. What, besides Handmaid's Tale, do you have a movie recommendation for us?
Oh, yeah. 8th grade, man. 8th grade is phenomenal.
Tell me about it.
Bo Burnham, his first film he's been a sort of a YouTube darling, but it's the first film he wrote and directed it. And it's about an 8th grade girl and her dad. He's a single dad raising her, but it's really about her, sort of, and she's super awkward. She was, an 8th grade graduation, she was named, most shy, and she's like mortified. But she makes these YouTube self-help videos that get 15 viewers, but she's kind of lively in the videos, but
Cool.
she does not know how to sort of manage herself in life. And it is just, I mean, it is a beautiful, occasionally heartsick, occasionally heartwarming movie. And it's like 88 minutes. I mean, it's great. It's a 10. It's as good a teenage, adolescent movie as I've ever seen.
8th Grade. It's in the theaters
Eighth grade.
now?
In theaters now, most places. It's slowly rolled out, but I think it's in 15 or 20 cities now. So it's good chance you have a chance that your listeners have a chance to see it.
All right, I will definitely go see it.
Your coastal elite listeners probably have a chance to see it.
The coastal elite listeners, this is a message only for the coastal elites. Have you seen Sorry to Bother You yet, Ben?
No, I have not seen Sorry to Bother You. I was going to mention one, which
It's
I know
really
is
good.
interesting,
Check it
and
out.
I'm anxious to see that too.
Yeah.
Also, Rob Reiner's movie, it's not great, but shock and awe about the Knight Ridder reporters who got the run-up to the Iraq War right.
Cool, I do want to see that.
And I mean, it's good because it's an important story. That movie's also short. It probably should be longer. Journalism movies are tough because it's guys making phone calls.
Right.
And it's just a reminder that a few people did get this right in the wave of Judy Miller et al. Who got it wrong. And these guys still aren't on every Sunday show.
No.
Like, that's what gets me is that they got it. They were good reporters. They were solid. They were like, hey, they've formed this secret intelligence cabal, and they're sort of freezing out other intelligence, and they're just determined to go to war in Iraq and to tie Saddam to 9/11. And none of this is probably true. And, I mean, in a sense, these guys should be, and their editor, who Rob Reiner also plays in the movie, like, they should be celebrated, right? It's like, in the face of enormous opposition, they did it right. And, they're still working, but why aren't they hosting CBS Sunday morning? Why isn't Warren Seibold the head of why isn't it this week with Warren Seibold instead of George Stephanopoulos? I'm not knocking George, but these guys should be being feted.
100%. I mean, my God, not only are they not, we still have the same cast of people who propagandized for the invasion on all the time, and in some cases, even their friggin' kids. And, besides Meghan McCain, I have to say, besides her unintentional, incredible boost she's doing for democratic socialism in this country every time she opens her mouth, I mean, it is kind of awe-inspiring, right? It's like we can't even forget even holding, the dad accountable for his role in that stuff. We're gonna skip the people who got it right and go straight to the nepotism jobs. I mean, it is pretty stunning.
Yeah, so it's worth seeing. But 8th Grade is a truly great American film.
8th Grade, Ben Mankiewicz, Turner Classic Movies, The Young Turks. It's always such a pleasure talking with you, my friend.
You too, Michael. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. I think what we're going to do, should we wait till the fun half to start this war with Trevor Noah? Yeah, we're going to need to. All right, we're going to do the war with Trevor Noah, and then again, we're definitely not going to get to all calls today. I am sorry, but it's just there's a lot of calls in this era.
It's too popular.
It's too popular. MR, it's really growing.
Well, I think
I like when Trump does stuff like that, where he's just like, it's growing.
What's going to happen, I think, is what happens with sort of radio shows that have been around for 15 years. And some of our callers have sort of like learned a little, sort of like how you do a call and in and out.
We've got some real pros.
It basically is. It's an evolutionary process.
It's an evolutionary process.
People discover what works and what doesn't.
You're gonna adapt, or you're not gonna adapt.
I think the best show with Tom Sharpling is the best for calls. Like they move through some calls on that show.
Well, I too have been known to move through some calls. I've definitely seen some bitching.
But they have the understanding with their audience that like this might seem rude.
I almost never mean
it's
it to
a gauntlet.
Actually, let me say, I think we all know who I meant it to be rude for. I had to see off Greg, and that was definitely meant to be rude and disrespectful in every way, shape, and form. Old man racist, rude. And a couple of others. For everybody else, I love you. I'm sorry. I just got to keep it moving. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. Just Coffee for fair trade, tea, coffee, or chocolate. Get the Majority Report blend. Become a patron of the Michael Brooks Show today. This Sunday, an illicit history of trade from Ricardo to Trump with Zach Carter. Listen back to dozens of illicit histories on Iran, Jamaica, CLR James, plus Woke Bros with Waz, plus the post game. And go subscribe to the new Michael Brooks Show YouTube channel, where we are clipping lots of segments from the show, including Nelson Mandela Owned Zionist. Patreon.com/TMBS. This Tuesday, Anna Kasparian and I are dissing Dave Rubin. That's been in the works for a very long time, and it's going to be very harsh. Antifada, what's up?
Yeah, so our new episode is now up. It's on the National Welfare Rights Organization and Marxist Feminism.
Good.
I'm also very excited to announce that we have blown past our initial goal of 183 patrons, which means we have now released a trailer for our soon-to-be-released debut of our epic cooking show, Acid Kitchen. It's on our newly launched YouTube channel, which will soon have all the free episodes as well. And we're also going to be on Spotify and a thing called Stitcher soon. So get stoked.
Sweet.
I feel I have to get the gushing out first.
Okay.
Sound drop before we even play the clip. Wow.
I love it. We're
not actually playing that clip.
We're not.
No.
We're saving that for some other godforsaken time.
Yeah, for Dave Rubin Duncan.
Rubin dunking. All right, Matt, Literary Hangover. What's up? What's going on?
Yeah, there's a new episode, Young Goodman Brown. Check it out on YouTube and also all the places you can find podcasts except Spotify. I'm not on there. But it's almost appropriate.
I think it kind of works.
And patreon.com/literary hangover. Also on Twitter. I don't plug this because I'm annoyed that I can't fit Literary Hangover. That's one character over the limit, so it's @lit hangover. So you can follow it there.
We will be right back on the Majority Report. Are we going to play one of our fun new break songs? Nope, La Poupée. All right. Shit. Welcome to the fun half. That was a very peak off mic comment from me to lead into the fun half. Oh, whatever. Ignore all that shit. No, it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
It's true. That's like my philosophy.
You know how people have a pinned tweet? That's just your pinned statement.
Somebody got upset
There's
at
some
me
truth to that.
for having a pinned tweet. Well, do you want to get into some Twitter drama that I'm going through? It's actually kind of fun.
Sure, Matt.
It's not serious. I mean,
you know what a big fan of Twitter drama I
this
am.
is the fun half. So,
all right, you find it, and I'm going to take our first
love
call.
it.
You're calling from an 857 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Be quick because we have Matt Leck Twitter drama to get to. 857, are you there? 857, are you there? Okay, Matt, are you ready with your Twitter drama?
yes,
All right,
that is
let's
true.
go.
So you were talking about our new TMBS YouTube page, correct?
Yes.
And we have this video that I titled Nelson Mandela Owns Zionist because I like speaking in YouTube title vernacular.
And because it's hilarious that like one of the greatest leaders of the modern age could be reduced to a Ben Shapiro title. It's innately funny.
Yep, exactly.
Yes.
And James at Bullet5951
Oh, God, I've
responded
seen
with
this guy.
And then a picture of a Daily Wire mug that says "Leftist Tears," hot or cold, Daily Wire. So some product placement there. But when I saw that, I thought James was a fan of ours, and literally, so I wrote, I really thought this was a fan sharing a super lame meme, ironically.
Right, naturally.
James responded saying, when your pinned tweet is attacking a reasonable guy at Reuben Report for no other reason than you disagree with him, that's your politics. So my question was, why do you think that video is attacking him? Because the video I have of Dave Rubin pinned to my profile is
just
this
Dave
one.
Rubin talking.
He's sitting here going, I'm for government. You know what I mean? Like, it really operated.
I think
in a
we've all
slim
seen
way.
this
But
video.
The government doesn't do
No,
anything
just
good.
play it out.
Name one problem you could possibly have in your life, Joe Rogan, that you'd be like, get the government to solve this. Do they do the post office well? No. What do they do well?
They do the post office pretty good, actually.
But guess what? If the post office closed tomorrow, it would be all right. You'd still get mail. Amazon would pick. No, it wouldn't. Amazon would pick that up.
Through UPS, it would cost a lot more.
It wouldn't, though. Competition would start kicking in, and between UPS and FedEx and Amazon and drones and blah 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 and DHL, they'd all start. It would probably drop prices because right now we've just got this artificial thing that sits there that then allows them to price according to that. But if you drop that, why is the government in that business anymore? I have three
you know
chickens.
what I love? All right,
I've really
what I love is like he's so stupid that he runs headfirst into saying that, but he's also kind of like he's savvy enough to get that look of terror in his eyes of like, oh, I'm just totally fucking up right now in
Shit.
front of millions of people.
I've reached the end of my talking points.
And
haven't I?
right, like I didn't know that Rogan was going to give me like the bare minimum of pushback where like the whole edifice of everything I think crumbles because I'm a total unbriefed moron. All right, does your drama with the troll continue?
No, it really
after
concludes with my question of like, why do you think me just posting that video without comment is attacking Dave Rubin? And I think we answer a lot when we answer that question.
Those guys, that guy always tweets at me too, and it's just like, as I say, it's always like whiny second orderism with these people. It's always like, why are the attacks? Why are the why are they like they never actually want to talk about anything on the merits, which is pretty funny. Like we call Dave Rubin a moron because he is, and then we go through explaining why his positions are ludicrous.
And we cackle sometimes,
And
but guess what? We can't help that.
Yeah, we're enjoying ourselves. And believe it or not, like, I don't know for this particular guy on YouTube, not Twitter, but, like, I've made this point before. Like, the patron saint for all of these people is still Christopher Hitchens, who one of the reasons I like, in spite of some major, seriously bad calls he made, was that he was a polemicist and he was funny. And it's like, you guys, it's so amazing. It's like, unless you're like, I don't know, terrorizing women or college students or something, you want everything else to be like a nice, gentle play. Don't make fun of Dave. He's a nice boy trying his best. Blah, blah, blah. Prices go down and whatnot. Don't laugh at that. That would be mean.
Yeah, Dave Rubin fans, this is like the Braveheart of ideas we're doing right now.
Yeah.
This is not beanbag.
This is not beanbag.
In the words of a wise man.
Yeah, precisely. Trevor Noah is infinitely more talented and intelligent than Dave Rubin. I have been trying to go to war with less people. But when you give me this kind of information and you put them together, which people literally did, like I got this texted to me, I got this emailed to me. I came into work this morning and people were like, Trevor Noah, this and this. And I was like, you know what? We're going to need to go to war.
Now I got to do it to him.
Now I got to do it to him. You know, every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. So let's start with this truly, like, this, I mean, this is like if Trevor Noah has been almost like his body became possessed by the late David Broder. Trevor Noah, who The Daily Show, I guess, is doing okay, but I mean, we're in a completely different media landscape, okay? Arguably, and I just think, whatever else you think of Jon Stewart, like when Jon Stewart left, like The Daily Show's over. I understand the profit and the business reason for keeping the brands, but like how you keep this show relevant in the ideological time we're in and the clickable content time we're in is going to require, at the very least, a little bit of an engagement and understanding with your audience that you're aiming for and the politics of our time. We're going to see how long we can get through this, but he has on AOC, and this is the most vintage concern trolling you could imagine.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Congratulations on being the nominee, and more importantly, congratulations on being both the dream of half the country and a nightmare of another half.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
You seem like you have been taking it. The term democratic socialist has never felt like it has more weight to it than now. We hear your name on the news every single day.
Sorry, but that just seems like a weird historically
we're already
statement to make.
We're already in just wrong. Like, that's not even like a quibble. That's like, dude, if you're gonna open a conversation like that with a prominent democratic socialist and make that statement, you should read a Wikipedia entry on Sweden. Go ahead.
When you use that term, what do you want people to understand by it?
Well, I think what I want people to understand is that we live in a society that is capable. We are capable of ensuring that we have basic frameworks where people can be covered by health insurance, can send their kids to college, where we can pursue a very bold action on climate change and save our future, and that it is part of a moral and ethical economy, and that we can legislate from that value, and where it is possible, I believe we are morally obliged to pursue it.
When you look at the power of labels, I mean, in politics, you understand.
Wait, there was a cut there. I think there was.
She had more to say.
It looked like there was applause. I thought maybe we can hear this, but maybe I'm just.
I was shocked. I would be shocked if there
statement.
I would be shocked if there wasn't applause. And usually, I'm the one who apes Sam's with the stop.
Yeah,
it.
I'm sorry.
Matt's very quick on the wait. Pause it. All right, go ahead. If we paused it for every stupid thing that Trevor Noah did in this clip, we will not get through any of it.
We've got so much to get through. Sorry.
Yes, fine.
Legislate from that value, and where it is possible, I believe we are morally obliged to pursue it.
When you look at the power of labels, I mean, in politics, you understand how powerful a label can be, you know, that's attached to your name or an idea. Do you ever consider taking socialist out of your label? And I asked this as an argument that I saw where there was an interesting idea where someone said millennials in this generation haven't been indoctrinated in the same way against socialism as the older generation has. And so then I thought, I was like, I wonder if Alexandria Cortez would say, no, I don't mind not being called a socialist, but these are still my platform ideas. Or
I'm sorry, now I need to do a pause. Okay, let's run that down. Okay, I honestly, I'm actually confused. So the first statement is socialist has baggage to it. So you should just say, I mean, by the way, let's expand this. Like, Christian has baggage to it. So should you say you're not a Christian? It's literally her politics. She is a democratic socialist, at the very least a social democrat, okay? You wouldn't ask that or frame that for anybody else, including
Democrats,
Republicans, anybody else who, by the way, their generic names would poll much worse right now. Then he goes, and I was thinking of this, and I thought, honestly, I was like, the natural progression when I first saw this is you're going to say, what about, voters, say, in their 60s or 70s who actually might be on board for some of your policies but are still a little afraid of that word? And then he goes, because the demo that you're a part of as a 28-year-old and the people that are propelling you into office, a key major constituent, they like the word socialism. So I'm wondering if you shouldn't call yourself that. That's literally what he just did.
The way he mentions that indoctrination, which is definitely there, right?
Yes.
And we are the generation that doesn't give a fuck about that stuff. But the way he mentions it is like it's a bad thing that you're not indoctrinated.
Right. So I don't know what he's doing there, but it is that actually is Rubin level logic. Let's keep going.
Pursue it.
When you look at the power of labels, I mean, in politics, you understand how powerful a label can be, that's attached to your name or an idea. Do you ever consider taking socialist out of your label? And I asked this as an argument that I saw where there was an interesting idea where someone said millennials in this generation haven't been indoctrinated in the same way against socialism as the older generation has. And so then I thought, I was like, I wonder if Alexandria Cortez would say, no, I don't mind not being called a socialist, but these are still my platform ideas. Or do you feel like you should be able to run on the platform and say you are who you are? Which one?
I'm sorry, I'm going to need to do another pause. Okay, practically and cynically speaking, if she today dropped the label socialist, that would be politically catastrophic for her in terms of the enthusiasm and base she's built for herself. Number two, okay, first, that would be catastrophic if she did that. And then secondly, I don't even understand what he's saying. He's saying you would still be a socialist on all the merits, but after alienating all of your people by dropping that label, somehow it would end up being better. Once again, Trevor Noah. Did he get hit by a shovel or something? I've seen plenty of segments where I disagree with him on, or I don't think he's particularly compelling. But I have never seen this type of just airheadedness from Trevor Noah before.
I think the why it's much more. Let me pull up this tweet with Bhaskar and responding to Josh Marshall, because I think it's more coherent when somebody like Josh Marshall makes this point, because they're actually from that generation, where Trevor Noah's from South Africa and not from our generation. So what does he really know about this? But
okay, yeah, Josh Marshall, separate point worth exploring. But most of what is now branded democratic socialism in the USA in 2018 is more or less the Truman presidential platform in 1948. So there are many definitional issues we probably need to work through. Now, before I get to Bhaskar, someone who's actually a scholar of that era, like Harvey Kaye, says, yes, that's true, and America's a pioneer of social democracy, and we should use that term. Now, Bhaskar says, wrong. Even if policies being proposed were similar, and they really aren't, and they aren't really, it's about context. Who's fighting for these reforms and why? The Bernie platform is about redistributing wealth and power from elites to ordinary Americans through class struggle. That's socialist politics. That's exactly right. And that is precisely the distinction, too. This isn't like we should do this because capitalism is breaking apart because of inequality. This isn't like we should do this because it's nice or charitable. We should do this because this is fundamentally unequal and corrupted, and we need to reclaim class power. And that is a fundamentally, no matter how moderate you make it, a socialist argument and a socialist position.
I mean, I have a few points on this, linking up to AOC's meeting with the Black Socialists of America, but I could save them for the end if you're flowing. The hate is flowing.
The hate is flowing. Let's get back to this clip, and then we will get to that after the plot twist in this Trevor Noah story. Okay.
Strength is that I am honest and I am authentic, and I think that even Republicans write letters to our campaign saying thank you. And one of the reasons they do that, A, is because getting money out of politics is a bipartisan and post-partisan issue.
Right.
Everybody recognizes that it's a problem. But then B, I think people appreciate that I am honest and that I'm not trying to not be who I am in order to get you to like me.
Right.
I'm here This is what it's about: Medicare for all, tuition-free public college, a Green New Deal. That is what I campaigned as, and that I think it's also important to say that this socialist label is something that I think the media cares more about, because I don't knock on a person's door and is like, hey, let me tell you about socialism. Like, that's
that wouldn't.
That's not how I campaign.
Yeah, that's like you Jehovah's Witnesses. That's
right,
like
exactly.
Wrong. That's total. Like, I mean, first, she's also setting up an unnecessary dichotomy there too. If you go to the door and you say, I have a set of policies that will benefit you, people might ask you what ideology they fall under, and that's okay. And I think anybody coming to the door saying debt cancellation, Medicare for all is probably going to be more welcome than a Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, but you don't lead with that.
I mean, yeah, you don't lead with these labels, but also the drama that he's putting on top of it is unnecessary as well. They're both making this way bigger than it needs to be, but that's because of
Go
Trevor
a little bit
Noah.
further, then we'll go
All right.
on Trevor.
Well, we need to get to the how are you going to pay for this part, and then we can stop it. Okay, well, we'll play a little bit more of it, but we will stop pausing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that I don't knock on a person's door and say, hey, let me tell you about being a Democrat. No, I don't say that. I speak to people's needs. And, if Fox News and if media want to continue using this word, they're going to use the word. I think by me saying, oh, no, I'm not, this, that, and the other, it just becomes a distraction. We're here to talk about wages. We're here to talk about education. We're here to talk about saving our planet. We're here to talk about a carbon tax. We're here to talk about people paying their fair share. And we're here to talk about saving the country, frankly.
Before I let you go, then that is one of the key things that I want to speak to you about then is those ideas. I think most people would agree on, especially if they don't know the label that they're attached to, you know? But then the pragmatic side of it comes in, as you said. How do you pay for these? You know, you always see people coming in with economic arguments, and they say, look, these numbers don't really add up. You know, in order to get health care for everybody, this is what it would cost. That's going to be troubling. Even if you reverse the Republican tax deal, that's only going to make up 5% of what we need to pay for Medicare for all. You know, how do you pay for education for all? How do you pay for all of these ideas?
So this is an excellent question. And in fact, there's a lot of back of the envelope stuff based on our values. So, for example, I sat down with a Nobel Prize economist last week. I can't believe I can say that. It's really weird. But,
yeah, we can stop this.
But one of the things...
Okay, so I think she does an okay job with that answer. But here's
the question was the problem.
The question was the problem. The question is a classic. It's like we're at like 1990s or 2009 concern trolling. Here's the answer, Trevor. There is a massive, unprecedented, even by Gilded Age and medieval levels, concentration of wealth in this society. What you do is you go to those people and you massively tax them. And then you also do things like slapping financial transaction taxes. Basically, there's literally trillions of dollars sitting around that's in a sclerotic, corrupted system. You get that money and you take it from the blood clots of wealth, inequality, and privilege and maldistribution. You reclaim it, and then you distribute it so that everybody has health care. It's really hard, but it's really simple, and asking that question is delusional and part of the problem. And I thought to myself, is Trevor Noah like, did he just get some type of like mediocrity brain transplant coming to America? I mean, obviously he doesn't know that much about U.S. politics. I could see that if you just kind of plopped down and, I don't know, read a couple of issues of The Economist to prepare for your job, maybe you would think that you were sort of ready to ask these questions and deal with the challenges of our time. But then somebody sent me this. This is a stand-up clip. And I want to say this. Everything in comedy is on the table to me. I will never, ever, ever critique a comedy routine because of a subject matter or a word or anything. Okay? It's all good. If you can pull it off. And as I said before, Jerry Seinfeld, what's the deal? Style musings with one of the worst labor massacres to happen in the post-apartheid era, the worst one, and one that was so strikingly violent, we're going to get to that in a second, that it spread across the global stage. Very hard to pull off. The Marikana massacre was in response to wildcat strikes that took place by South African miners in 2012. 30 miners were slaughtered by the police. We'll get to that in a second. But first, here's Trevor Noah's stand-up bit about it.
And the stories make you worry about South Africa. You think everything's going wrong out here. Because they don't report the news well. It's sensationalism. Like Marikana, the Lonmin disaster. What? Oh, I didn't even know what was going on there. You just read the news and you're like, what? They shot them for dancing. But it wasn't. It was the police versus the miners, and they wanted money, and it was a sad situation. No one really knows what happened. But everyone has an opinion. I like this. Everyone knows what should have been done. You know, people on the radio, people on the news. Yeah, you know, these bloody police have gotten out of hand. They're busy shooting people, and why didn't they use rubber bullets? Why didn't they use rubber bullets and tear gas? Because those things don't work anymore. They used it the whole week, and they couldn't control people, so they had to come with ammunition because those guys had weapons. Plus, tear gas is a waste of time. Which strike has ever ended because of tear gas? Where have you ever heard that on the news? And after the police deployed the tear gas, everybody went home. No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen. Tear gas has just become part of a strike now. It's like a little smoke machine. It's just like, adds ambiance to the atmosphere. It's just, you're wasting your time with tear gas, man. Everyone has ideas what the police should have done. You hear them on 702. You know, the sad thing is they didn't even warn the miners first. Why didn't they warn them? When someone has a gun pointed at you like this, is that not a warning anymore? My favorite was the National Union of Mine Workers. They said, what is the worst thing in this circumstance is that the police did not even ask the miners what they wanted. Before they should have asked them, what did they want? At what point do you ask these people? At what point? And pray do tell, who is the super soldier that's willing to keep his cool when 1,000 men marching towards him with they've got spar, they've got pangas, they've got spears. Who is the super soldier who's keeping his cool in this situation? Just standing there with his 20 fellow policemen. The sergeant there, ready, aim. He's like, whoa, sergeant. Can't just shoot, my man, can't just shoot. Don't charge, you don't know what these guys want, my man. What's wrong with you, eh? It's ridiculous. That's what it is. Absolutely ridiculous.
So, yeah, that is absolutely ridiculous. And clearly that clip is, a little bit edited. So maybe in the stand-up routine, Trevor Noah said, here are all the examples of total fucking asshole things to say about the slaughter of miners. And I'm just going to play them out, in which case we would be taking them out of context.
And if that's the case, let us know. We'll note it.
Let us know. We'll fix it. And also, I thought that it was pretty well. I thought by any standard, including like as an example, that's like Israel-style justification here. Okay, kites, spears, no. And yes, another way that you end strikes is by paying miners a proper wage and protecting them, which is why they're striking in the first place. Here's actual footage of the police opening fire and slaughtering these people. I don't see pointed guns in this clip.
A report into the 2012 massacre of dozens of South African miners has called for the police officers who carried out the shootings to be investigated. The inquiry found that mine operator Lonmin had failed to prevent the violence and meet the reasonable wage demands of its striking workers. Clashes took place over several days during a wildcat strike after many men brought weapons to the picket line.
Yes, they did bring weapons to the picket line, including things like spears, to protect themselves because security forces had already been brought in to threaten them with weapons. Now, again, it bears real repeating here. No police were harmed. No one was assaulted. But there were a couple of people in the strikes that had, like, makeshift weapons. Not only were 30 of them slaughtered in that unprompted clip that we just saw, they were actually arrested under an apartheid-era law, which we're going to see this clip from 2012 with Tony Harris and Mike Hanna.
Johannesburg. And Mike, okay, so all of the charged miners have now been released. Remind us again of how they came to be arrested in the first place, because as we just mentioned, it was pretty controversial.
It was very controversial indeed, Tony. They were arrested and charged under what is known as a common purpose doctrine, which basically says you do not have to commit an act as long as you were in the vicinity, you could be responsible for it. So they were charged with murder resulting from the death of more than 30 of their colleagues during that strike last month. However, there was a massive public outroar, many pointing out, in fact, that that common purpose doctrine is based in legislation that was used extensively in the apartheid years against those demonstrating against the then white-ruled regime. The National Prosecuting Authority was forced to back down eventually, agreeing to drop all the charges. So we now have more than 200 of these miners released from prison, all charges dropped, the murder charges gone away.
And this was also considered to be the worst massacre in South Africa since the Sharpeville massacre, which occurred in the 1960s. Look, apparently there's a context for Trevor Noah's concern trolling about how you pay for things, because he couldn't even understand that miners striking for basic wages and basic safety improvements. And by the way, another thing that was disclosed about the Marikana massacre was that Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the current president of South Africa and was in the 1980s a union leader and a lawyer for the mine unions, who played an incredibly important role internally in ending apartheid. He then was deployed to the private sector and was on the board of that company. And he emailed and asked for what he called concomitant action against the strikers. So that's what Trevor Noah was running interference for with his stand-up. And now he's here trying to undermine people getting debt cancellation and health care. And if you combine that with the fact that he just really isn't that funny, we're going to the What's Beef zone.
Take your resistance viewing elsewhere.
Please.
I know you don't think that punching up or down matters that much, but I would hold that part of what makes this so unfunny is that he is siding with the police and with the oppressors and making his jokes at the expense of these workers who are literally just striking for their own survival.
I think that's true. I don't think it proves a general point, though.
It doesn't prove a general point, but yes, I would say it is a very heavy lift. I mean, also, look, if he did a routine that had like a kind of broad-based cynicism about it. I mean, I'm not going to get into like a debate about the semantics of this, but that was barely even stand-up. That was like a editorial against the mine workers.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That was disgusting.
I have a few points on socialism, if I may, because I feel like I have a slightly different but not entirely dissimilar take from you and Bhaskar. You know what? Let me put myself on camera for a second. So, yeah, on the topic of all these folks calling themselves socialists, I think socialism is a murky term with many different definitions and interpretations. My definition is fairly traditional in that I think workers need to take democratic control over the means of production, get rid of private property and all of the ways in which capitalists make passive income off of the rest of us. Wage labor, which is profoundly alienating, and the bourgeois state that enforces all of these. Bernie is not a socialist by that definition. He's a social democrat, technically, but I support him anyway because he brings class politics into the mainstream, and he makes the S word far less scary to people, and it served as a gateway drug to many people, including to some degree myself. I became much more politically active after 2016, even though I'd held pretty far left politics for a while, from my armchair position. And the kind of social democracy that they're describing, it relieves suffering in the short term because people can't die waiting for the revolution, right? And many of us also see it as a transitional program where people are empowered to ask for even more, and their reliance on jobs and their bosses are made lesser so that they can stand up and fight for themselves. So the Black Socialists of America actually met with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently to discuss some of this stuff with her. There's a statement that I might link in the blog post, and I think it's pretty good because they're coming at it in a very nice, sort of non-combative way. They begin by praising her for all that she's done for class politics in America, and then they put forth their ideology and their program, which is, they go over a little bit of the history of black socialists in America. They say, we've had socialist movements and representation in government here in America before. The mistake that socialist coalitions have made in the past, however, was thinking that top-down, primarily legislative measures that preserved capitalist relations would be enough to make things right. Decades since the passing of the New Deal, we've learned the limits of this direction and now know that we must dig deeper, building democratic institutions in the common sector amongst the poor and working class people first. So I think that's a really nice way to go about it. You're not just like shitting on someone for not having politics as radical as yours, but at the same time, you're saying like, no, this isn't enough. We believe that we actually need to go beyond social democracy and end capitalism and transition to a truly democratically controlled society. So,
and there's no contradiction functionally right now between those sentiments.
I mean, that's the thing is, I think like I am totally fine if people want to label socialist as meaning like worker control of whatever, right? Worker control of the economy. But I do think that there's an emerging new concept that whatever we want to call it, like American democratic socialism, that is not just Bernie led, because I think Bernie basically captured energy that was already there, but he definitely funneled it a certain energy that is not that sort of is into electoral politics, right? Because the DSA, in my opinion, grew relative to say other socialist organizations because on top of things like ICE protests and strike support, because they had huge bumps. We all know this after Bernie and after Hillary lost and after AOC. So like to me, like there is a socialist that really wants to see the electoral thing done well. But I agree with what Jamie says, and I think also AOC would acknowledge it too, that Ocasio-Cortez isn't saying that you just need more people like me. What she is saying is we need more people like me to help me do the mission that I'm going on, which I think is an important mission.
As I said, we do have to keep it moving though.
But there is an important distinction between the horizon of social democracy as the solution to all of these problems of inequality and social democracy as a transitional program to something more radical where you actually do take
we
control
get
of
into
production.
a space where that's
where we're doing
viable,
that transition,
then that's awesome. We can have that debate.
You gotta keep your eyes on the prize, folks.
Okay, speaking of eyes totally not on the prize, let's look at this actually does underscore the Trevor Noah thing. This is why all questions about spending and the deficit are total bullshit. And anybody who brings them up is undermining any type of movement in the direction of either full economic democracy, like Jamie's talking about, or essential social democracy. And this is another example of Republicans telling on themselves. This is Representative Tom Reed in New York's 23rd district, so probably someone who can be taken out in the next election cycle. And of course, this is what Republicans do. After blowing up the deficit in a orgy of redistribution of wealth to the already infinitely over wealthy, they then evoke a lot of concerns about the deficit. But in this one, he's going to sort of get all three mixed up at the same time.
I know you had a chance to meet with the president's top economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, over at the White House earlier this morning. Did you talk about the federal deficit? Because it's absolutely ballooning right now under President Trump and the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate. Take a look at this. The Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, as you know, now expects it to hit $1 trillion by next year. How do you explain that to voters who sent Republicans to Washington to shrink that deficit, come up with some sort of balanced budget?
Well, this is why I disagreed with our leadership on the the recent spending bill, where I voted against it, because I think we did the right thing in tax reform to grow the economy. We're seeing economic growth, job creation in America that we haven't seen in decades. That is a key component of the solution to the problem of the national debt. But Wolf, what we need to do is get the spending under control. This is a spending-driven problem, and to my colleagues on our side of the aisle, let's roll up our sleeves and work across the aisle to solve the spending problem that's causing this deficit crisis in our time.
Do you support borrowing $12 billion from China to help U.S. agricultural, to help American farmers deal with the tariffs issue that the president has himself put forward that has hurt American farmers?
Well, I appreciate the offer of assistance, and bringing this disruptive trade policy to the table is something I support the administration on, because for too long have we let this trade imbalance take hold, and these unfair trade practices keep us from a fair and level playing field. So I'm supportive of the administration's actions and recognizing that in the short term there are going to be consequences to that disruption. But I think at the end of the day, this policy will bring long-term growth to our farmers, long-term stability, and that's a better position to be in than the short-term hiccups we may see.
Oh my God. All right, so there you go. They're telling on themselves. They care about redistributing money to rich people.
These people
That's
are
it.
Vampires.
They're vampires, and nobody ever who talks about the deficit means it. And if they do, they're delusional. Those are the options. People who talk about the deficit are either Republican or Democratic ghouls who want to slash spending and give more away to the wealthy. Or
shout out to Grover Norquist.
Shout out to Grover Norquist. Shout out to Paul Ryan. Shout out to Mitch McConnell. Shout out to Donald Trump. Shout out to all of them. Shout out to
shout out Alec.
Shout out Alec. And then if you're on the flip side, if you're asking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez how you pay for it, you're a useless centrist concern troll. All right. Now, here, just at the moment that the Republicans are getting in trouble because of the Trump administration hacking away at the Affordable Care Act, here is Trump bragging about getting health care out of the reach of millions of Americans.
We've also liberated millions of Americans from the crushing burdens of Obamacare. The cruel individual mandate penalty is gone. That's where you pay a lot of money for the privilege of not having to buy bad health care and pay for it. It's gone. Nobody thought we could get rid of it. That was the most unpopular provision by far, probably on anything, but certainly in Obamacare. And Obamacare is now on its last legs, fortunately. And through associated health plans, we're giving Americans the ability, just opened, millions of people going to be signing up, millions and millions. We're giving Americans the ability to join together to purchase much better and more affordable health care and health insurance, including bidding across state lines. So all of the insurance companies are going wild. They want to get it. You're going to have great health care at a much lower price. It will cost the United States nothing. Nothing. Think of that. Will cost us nothing. And that's Secretary Acosta. Secretary Azar is coming out with another health care plan, somewhat different. Result the same. Much less expensive health care at a much lower price.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Medicare for all for a second. Much less expensive
This is
than
like the
healthcare
tax
for
deal
all.
2.0. It's like they want to demonstrate that they're not ashamed of what they've done. So like we're just going to do everything over again because we like it that much.
Yeah. I mean, look, here's the broader reality is obviously forcing anybody to deal with private market healthcare is unethical and inefficient, and everybody needs to be covered under Medicare. If this rollback was working so well, why do we have even people in Texas begging Trump to restore subsidies in some of their markets? These plans he's talking about are either literally non-existent or so degraded in terms of quality that they're almost analogous to not even having any insurance at all.
It's just amazing that he comes out on TV this morning, literally 3 days after CMS restarted $10 billion worth of payments in risk funding.
Right.
It's insane.
Par for the course. You're calling from a 561 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Brian. I'm calling from Florida.
Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, not much, man. Just started listening to you guys a few months back, and really big fan.
Thanks.
I realize you guys are partners with the Ring of Fire Network and also partners with the Young Turks Network.
Mm-hmm.
And recently also noticed that they've started launching on YouTube TV. I like listening to you guys, like listening to all their shows and everything. Out of curiosity, is there anything in the works with you guys partnering up with them and potentially getting your own show with them on YouTube TV?
I don't think so. But
no,
yeah, no. But yeah, man. I mean, I go on the Young Turks when I'm in L.A., and yeah, there's a loose affiliation, but no plans about that I know of. Anything else?
No, just like big fan. Just gonna keep listening to you guys. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, man. Have a good one. You're calling from a 404 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey guys, this is Patrick from Georgia.
Hey, what's up?
I'm just calling about my hopes for the election of a social democrat president, but also my concerns as to what the pushback for that would be around my neck of the woods, giving a lot of the rhetoric from people over here about socialism, always comparing it to Venezuela and the USSR over positive examples like Scandinavia, and mixing in that the gun rights rhetoric that they have as well, saying every time that school children lose their lives to gun violence, their ultimate out is we need these in case the government goes too far so that we can have a citizens' uprising. So in the scenario that, say, Bernie gets elected, I would think that it would be possible that some American ISIS-style militias would pop up.
Sure.
And I'm not very optimistic.
Dude, but
that,
let me tell you something, man.
Law enforcement here would oppose those sentiments.
I think everything you're saying is true, and I think everything you're saying would happen if Joe Biden is elected president. Like there's nothing to do with the merits. There was a spike in all of those types of groups under Obama, who obviously couldn't have been more centrist and center right in terms of reality. There was a spike in those groups under Bill Clinton. I mean, that's what it is, and they're going to call it socialist, whether it's whether it's like literally the, some think tank plan cooked up by a couple of ex-hedge fund guys written for Third Way, or whether it's an actual decent plan to get people health care. That's just how the game is played. So,
but also, like, I think the more substantial and the more forceful reaction is going to come from the top. Like, it's not going to be... I really don't think it's going to be some sort of grassroots upswelling of
against
reactionary
socialism?
action.
Absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. But those things are always converge for them. I mean, the Tea Party was an AstroTurf group that harnessed genuine public misinformation with oligarch money.
Right.
And that combination is always going to be the case.
Yeah, but the Bundy Ranch seemed like a pretty organic thing as a result of just being indoctrinated with right-wing media, and those sorts of movements have a groundswell to them.
I think that that's true. I think that these things, even if they start as pure corporate propaganda, which they almost always do, they take on a cultural life of their own, and that is there. It's
I don't know
here.
how sustainable that was. Bundy should have been dealt with much more harshly, in my opinion.
I mean, I have to believe that once these people realize that they do get free health care now and their kids get to go to college, like, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but
you need to watch
some
Sacha
of the
Baron
steam
Cohen's
would come
new
out
show.
of that reaction once they actually get the things.
You need to watch Sacha Baron Cohen's new show.
Ironically, I think going after guns and religion might be the ways to stoke that a bit more. Right.
You're calling from a 954 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's Michael from Miami. How are you guys?
Michael from Miami. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
Guys, I haven't been able to get through. It's you're way popular. Congratulations on the spike in approval. Calls from all over the world. Well
popular.
done.
Way popular.
More and more people are talking.
Everybody
Yeah,
says
you know
so.
what's interesting? Okay, I think that it's fair to say that I fundamentally disagree with a lot of the positions that you folks take on a lot of electoral politics, but I do love listening to you because I just don't, and I hate to say this, I'm going to sound like the old guy in the room, and I am. I just don't get the perspective politically on a wide mass media scale that we get from this show. I don't hear, Jamie, I disagree with a lot of your perceptions, but I love the fact that you bring passion and factual support and intelligence to the conversation. I don't think a lot of people hear that, and even though...
So long as you do it with passion.
Well, no,
right?
but
Why Coke?
But, seriously, no,
I'm just playing.
passion without facts is like empty. It's like the crazy person on the sidewalk with a sandwich board around their neck. It means nothing. But in this case, I think there are arguments, and I know that Sam and Cliff are always fond of talking about the Overton window, which is classically what's going on here. And I hate to sound like I said, the old guy in the room, but I've been around covering and watching an election since 1976.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to see how the goalposts really do move.
Yep.
You would have never been able to convince me, and I know why a lot of the moderate Democrats, conservative Democrats, are fearful of AOC's message, because they see a McGovern, they see and I guess, I'm sorry, is it Matt, the gentleman who likes to listen to the Nixon tapes? Is that your name, son?
Yep.
I apologize.
Yes, sir.
You can you certainly can get,
Awesome.
that there's a lot of historical fear that taking a position that far from the center, but the perceived center, is a disaster. And they've seen the wipeouts in 72 and 84, and they've seen the essential wipeouts. You said it yourself just now in your interview, 1,000 state legislatures.
Well,
gone.
that was
Gone.
1,000 state legislatures had nothing to do with any. It was the opposite of having.
No,
a
that
message.
was feckless leadership
Yeah.
on behalf of
Yeah.
Obama. I
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
agree.
I think
with you on
McGovern
that.
too. I mean, we've done shows on that as
Yeah,
more
I
of an
also-
abandoning of labor base.
I also don't. I also think
Yeah.
there's a very big difference.
But that's why
for-
they're afraid, Michael. That's
Yeah,
why they're
I think
afraid.
that's why
They're
some of
afraid
them
that
are
they've been
afraid. I
burned
think some of them. I think some of them are afraid like that. I think some of them just have different politics. I think also, as I said earlier with Ben Dixon, I think, like, I don't know if you heard me and Ben Dixon before, but I said, look.
I did. It was great.
Okay, yeah.
It was
So
great.
Harry Reid, I have no doubt that I'm on a totally different part of the political map than he is, but I respected the fact that he knew what he was up against and he was a fighter. Chuck Schumer is wrong ideologically, and he's a feckless loser wussbag. And I think that the other kind of metric that gets missed in the conversation is like when you're talking about Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Connie-Ella Ng, you're also just talking about clear, tough communicators who have simple, sharp messages that are responsive to most people's needs in the current environment. And that's a
When I
winning
was in
strategy.
when I was in journalism, the most important thing you had to do when you did a story was, why should people care?
Right.
And the way you got around that, the way you did it, was you personalized every national issue with a person that lived in your viewing area, okay, whether it be in Wisconsin or Michigan or South Florida, wherever the case may be. That's how
Right.
you did it. You went about the business of showing, how does this tax cut affect this person? Why should they care?
Right.
This is the elementary message that the Democratic national leadership is incapable of apparently putting together.
Incapable.
It's one or two sentences. It's a slogan that you may not believe in. You may think it's Madison Avenue sellout stuff, but it sticks in people's minds. Something as simple as, we're on your side, and here's why. We're on your side. We're here to help you out with your medical bills. We're here to help with your kids' education. We're here to make sure your kids don't get slaughtered in school. We care about you. You stand up, you make that argument, and you pound it into their heads, and eventually it gets through. It may not have.
I think the difference
are,
today, though, Mike, is I think is different, and I could speak to this very specifically in terms of like, coming up with Obama, and even then, I knew that I had different politics than Obama, but I'm telling you, particularly for younger people, it's not that everybody's like a policy wonk, but it's not good enough. It's not even a question. I don't have any moral judgment. I think great slogans are important. I think great political advertising is clearly important. All that stuff is great. But the difference between 2020 and 2008 for younger people is, okay, great. What is your specific plan to cancel student debt? The difference between, and also for the people you're talking about, enough. What's your plan? Okay, we know Trump is full of shit when he talks about trade, but I don't want another candidate that's backing NAFTA and TPP. So I actually think that what what is amazing about old line Democrats to me, in the sense you're using the phrase, is that they're totally failing by both metrics. They're ideologically totally out of date, and maybe they're scared about McGovern or whatever, but I mean, I'm sorry, you got to move on with history a little bit. But even by their own metric, they're not Bill Clinton. They're not Barack Obama. They're not Tony Blair. They are not Emmanuel Macron. These are guys that I all fundamentally disagree with and don't like, but I'm the first to admit that they had high political skills. These people don't have that. So what are they bringing to the table? Nothing.
I think we're talking about two things. The distinction without a difference. When you make what I'm suggesting to you is the overarching theme. What you're speaking about are the tentacles underneath which need to be explained, and that's important. It's critical. I'm not disagreeing with you at all. Yes, you need specifics. Specificity is what's going to win you the debates. What I'm suggesting to you is that in order to get your message across, in order to beat, look, guys, we all agree on one thing, okay? Left, center, right, I don't care which part of the party. These people have to be defeated. Agreed?
Yes, of course.
Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
We want to win. I'm tired of effing losing the time to these mouth-breathing Neanderthals. And the way to do this, unfortunately, is you must be able to connect with the majority of your audience, which is not sophisticated the way you folks are used to talking. The guys who listen to your show, the guys who read your stuff, are on your blogs, go to your podcasts, go to your meetings. They're not the same people.
I gotta tell you, this
same.
is the part that honestly it breaks down for me, because I actually think, and I think, granted, look, if you're watching Majority Report or Michael Brooks show or whatever, like, yes, you have a much higher interest in the specifics of history and politics, and
not just interest. You have knowledge.
Yeah, no doubt.
You have knowledge.
No doubt. But on the flip side, we played that Kaniela Ng ad yesterday. There's nothing complicated about that. It's too expensive to live here. Here's a plan for housing, healthcare, student debt cancellation. Boom, 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 boom. Which I 100% am with. So I don't see the argument here, to be honest with you.
Can I do a very self-indulgent thing and recommend an article that I wrote?
Please.
It goes into, it's called "The Democratic Party Must Be Destroyed," which is an intentionally provocative title, making a case for how the left could sort of stage, not a reform, not a realignment, but sort of a hostile takeover, like when socialists run on the Democratic ballot line, because it makes sense to do so. And I go into a lot of the historical reasons why McGovern lost, including the utter non-support of his own party, which is something I think we might see again.
Do you know why there
if
was?
Bernie
Do you know why
got the
there was utter
nomination.
non-support from his party back then? Now, it's
from the
not fair to
leadership of
ask
his
because
party.
You guys are reading from the history books, and I actually lived it. I got to talk about the old guy in the room.
Why?
You do realize there was a 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. It's world famous, of course. Everybody knows what happened. Daley's thugs, the whole deal.
Right.
Because of the cleavage which took place at that point in time, there became such an anger from the people in the streets who were getting the crap beat out of them by the Chicago Police Department that they decided we're not going to let this happen again. So when they reconvened in Miami 4 years later, the determination was made, we're taking over the Rules Committee, we're taking over the internal apparatus, and we're going to do it our way. And they did. The problem was the people who were the moneyed interests, who would these days be supporting Kamala Harris and Cory Booker probably in the next 2 years, those people stayed away from them. They had no desire to be anywhere near those folks. And so McGovern went out there with a bunch of people. Gary Hart was on his campaign, a bunch of other people who had all the wonderful ideas in the world and had no effing support.
But Mike,
and they ended up getting slaughtered.
Mike, I hope
can't have that happen,
Mike,
guys.
Mike,
You
just
can't do
real,
that
but
anymore.
Mike, just
the
real,
time for
Mike,
experiments. We got to win and then work.
Okay, but hold up. We're running really tight on time, so let me.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I don't want to hog the time.
But what?
I haven't talked to you guys once.
No, I miss talking to you too. But what? I don't understand what's missing here. I'm setting all the other stuff aside. Everybody gets health care, fair trade, student, like maybe a couple things that shift a little bit from district to district. There's nothing that's not clear, simple, and deliverable about that. And there's so we're on the same page.
Yeah, we are. But I mean, I guess Jamie's position about destroying the Democratic Party. Look, I understand there's hyperbole involved in that.
Yeah, don't
and
get lost
goes on.
in.
But at the end of the day, I've covered campaigns from Wisconsin to South Florida to the other parts of this country. People care about 4 elementary areas of their life. 4. That's it. Okay? Whatever these consultants and these other idiots tell you is mindless. They care about their personal well-being. They care about their children's well-being. They care about their economic well-being, and they care about their leisure time. Those are the 4 areas.
Oh, actually, I sort of called it.
Yeah. Doesn't matter if you're in Birmingham, Alabama, or Burlington, Vermont. That's what they care about.
So they don't care about what happened to
those areas
McGovern?
like you just did, and you can make it a concise message that you can win.
I
But
think
don't
so.
see that happening.
Well,
I think it's happening from our people. I think that's what we're doing. I think the ones that you're worried about are the ones with the concise message, and that's what I'm getting confused about. I really, because I think again, I'm giving you both metrics. I'm giving you
the message is the same, Michael. We agree on the message.
Yeah,
the
so it's
delivery
great.
apparatus, which I'm arguing with.
Well, let's go.
Your delivery apparatus does not take into account the realities of where we have to get people's attention.
I don't know what you mean.
But the candidates that run in those areas that we're trying to flip
mean.
and like bring back the House are not, or should be the ones where candidates are running not from the center but from an AOC position where it's like I can deliver these things for you as opposed to we need to impeach.
Those states voted for Bernie in the primary.
I appreciate the call,
and
man.
If you read to the end of my article, I make a fairly convincing case for why the social conditions now are totally different, and the hardest race to win for a Bernie-type candidate would be the primary, not the general election. And coupled with an article in Jacobin called "Why Bernie Can Win" by Matt Karp, I think I've got a pretty strong case.
100%. All right, this also
I mean, just to
illustrates
tie up. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you want to play this Fox clip?
I do want to play it, but like I think the implication was that like the money people aren't going to like it, so they're going to leave. Which good, fuck them.
Yeah, dude, I think, Mike, if that's the implication, I totally understand why that's a historical concern, and I sympathize with it. But we're at a point.
They're going to leave.
We're at a point of there isn't even. You might have said there might have been a certain period of time where you're just like, look, practically there's no left base. There isn't. It just doesn't exist
The late 70s,
right now.
80s might have been a good time to make that argument.
Absolutely. The 90s was a good time to make that argument on the strategic merits. But right now, that is not only is that not the picture right now, there is no way of co-satisfying Steve Klubeck and normal people that want to go out and vote. That doesn't exist. And if Steve Klubeck decides that it's too much, I'm going to go, then okay, then he writes another fucking check to a Republican super PAC. And you know what? It is a battle between labor and capital.
Yeah, it's bad money after bad in that case.
Yeah.
And if the people in positions of power in the party are in a position of subverting the democratic will of the base, maybe that's a bad system.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed. And this is also shows you, like, this is what they're afraid of. They're not 24/7 having meltdowns on Fox because Chuck Schumer's like, Donald Trump's very impolite.
The gas tax.
The gas tax.
And they definitely aren't running segments like this because they're worried what AOC is doing is not getting them power.
Precisely. Let's watch this segment.
Why is it that in this early part of this century, socialism suddenly makes a reappearance? Why?
This is getting scary. If you pay attention, it will scare you.
Socialists becoming the mainstream of the left.
The Democratic Party is embracing socialist values.
They talk about things that everybody wants.
Let's see. Single-payer, universal health care, universal jobs.
They're saying, I want free Medicare. I want a guaranteed salary.
Government-subsidized housing for everybody.
Fully funded public universities and schools.
Abolish ICE and, of course, impeach President Trump.
What happened in Venezuela? They call that democratic socialism.
The average Venezuelan has lost 24 pounds because they're starving to death.
In Venezuela, human beings are taking dog medicine.
Their ultimate end is either North Korea or Venezuela.
Just look at Venezuela.
What country is this? Venezuela?
They're going to be the left of Venezuela.
Venezuela?
Venezuela. Venezuela. Venezuela.
Venezuela.
Venezuela.
She's talking more about Scandinavia than Venezuela.
Would socialism require that we give everything back? Let's hang out at the coffee shop and talk about socialism.
I'm a democratic socialist. Shut up, will ya?
Maybe go easy on the socialism. When you think of the atrocities that have been committed in the name of socialism, in the name of communism, it's just staggering.
Single-payer healthcare system is very frightening to me indeed.
The left of the Democratic Party is describing communism, not socialism. Communism.
Indeed.
All this talk about Russian influence going on, but if you really think about it, the real takeover of the Marxists, the socialists, the old Soviet Union is on the Democrat Party.
So if Democrats want to go out and say, let's have socialism.
And they really mean communism.
And actually claiming they are the new normal for your Democratic Party. Okay.
Free college. You look at socialized medicine, single payer. You look at income, universal income.
And everything's free. You're going to get everything free. Lollipop's going to fall from the sky.
Why do you think people want socialism?
I'll explain it very easily. It's like the mob. You want something, you take it. Who pays for it? You pay for it. Or the other guy pays for it. What's the difference? We're going to take it, keep it, take it, give it to somebody who deserves it. That's what we're going to do.
Right.
If you are still a socialist after 25, you've got no head. You know who said that, I'm sure.
I think Churchill said that,
yes,
didn't
sir. Yes, sir. Correct.
He never said that. That's awesome. By the way, let me also just say, when people ask like where the money for all this comes from, it's going to come, even in the social democratic variety, through a massive reclaiming of stolen wealth. And part of the reason for that, setting ethics aside, is the same reason that they asked Willie Sutton why he robbed banks. And I hope that this ends up in a Fox clip. They asked Willie Sutton why he robbed banks, and he said, because that's where the money is. So it's really simple. And that's where the money is. And by the way, there's two scenarios. One scenario is that they think that they're scared because they recognize that this is a popular forward-looking agenda, or they're delusional enough to think that basically doing a 24-hour advertisement for actual intelligent forward-looking democratic leadership is going to hurt us. Either way, they're not calling the plays correctly. And it's just a bunch of air-dried, delusional, immoral, disgusting TV actors on midday hyperventilating, and that's great.
It's also possible that they think it's a slippery slope to fully transitioning from capitalism to socialism, which is pretty much the reason why I support these programs. So maybe I should have a little faith in my position.
Yeah, that's my theory. And actually, that is a funny irony, which is that conservatives often seem to more fully understand where things are going than liberals do.
Definitely.
No, yeah, watch the coverage between Fox News leading up to the fall elections versus like CNN and MSNBC trying to obfuscate what this actually is and try to say, well, it's always kind of been like this. We've had X, Y, and Z programs that did something like this in the 1940s or the whole Josh Marshall tweet.
Right.
Yeah.
You're calling from a 266 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 266. Sorry. All right. Real quick, Jamie.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny how a lot of the time the right-wing outlets have sort of a more accurate read on what the left is doing than the liberal outlets do. The Daily Caller had that thing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was endorsed by Democratic Socialists of America. Did you know they have a revolutionary socialist caucus? Did you know they have a radical Marxist caucus? Yes, those things are fine. We're a multi-tenancy organization. She's the right flank of it. We're the left flank of it. There's no conflict there. But yeah, maybe the right is right to be scared that our plan might work.
I often think that with the reaction to Obamacare, if I'm a billionaire right-winger, that's not actually that befuddling to me, because I actually do look at that as people are going to decide that they have a universal right to health care. I want to put the kibosh on that.
Right.
Here's the thing.
You're calling from a 478 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Michael, I'm here to run the gauntlet. This is Jeff from Georgia.
Jeff from Georgia with the final call of the day. What's on your mind, Jeff?
First off, Matt Leck at the top of the fun half. I got bad news for you, buddy. That guy was probably Dave Rubin in a Scooby-Doo mask.
Oh, the sock puppet? Yeah.
Yeah. Just a hunch, man. I don't know nothing that you don't know. Hey, man, I'm just going to change topics just a little bit. Just keep on brand. And I'm serious about this. One thing that I care about very much is a project of anti-racism. Mm-hmm. It's not just enough not to be racist. I want to promote anti-racism.
Right.
Grappling in two parts of that project, I think, at least. One is grappling and explaining the system of white supremacy, slavery, housing, discrimination, what have you, the history of these structures and mechanisms and how they force the way of society that we have. But the other is an exploration of the people who at various times in history to various degrees did not want to go along with all of that. Mm-hmm. You hear me? And in their opposition, of course, they lost every time until they didn't lose no more. And how did that happen? Well, it happened through the efforts of a lot of different people. One of my favorite heroes, unironically, John Brown, world-famous abolitionist. I put together a very fine first part of a series on him. If you're interested in how things got to be the way they were, how he started a war to free the slave when no one else really wanted to, you go check out my podcast, man.
Cool. I did, actually.
I listened to the John Brown episode.
Yeah. I became a
Did you really? Oh, my God. You just made me so happy. I hope you liked it, man.
I became a patron of your podcast, dude. I don't know if you noticed that, too.
No, I did notice that, and it made my day. I appreciate it, man.
All right, man. Thanks for the call. All right, guys.
Can't fight capitalism without fighting white supremacy.
All right. No more calls, a few more IMs, then we're out of here. Asha, cricket player Imran Khan is the next prime minister of Pakistan. Very interesting results. I'm cautiously optimistic. I am not cautiously optimistic. Imran Khan is kind of garbage, but the other options were garbage too, but that's probably TMBS show topic that we will probably get to what's happening there. Mike in Florida. I'm an old guy too. As moneyed people become fewer, the requirement for their support of the Democratic Party becomes less necessary. Rich Democratic Socialists will always be welcome on the left. Jay Tingle, the Willie Sutton quotation is also apocryphal. Whatever, I don't care. It's funny.
Which was the Willie Sutton one?
Why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Let's see. It's a great quote. I don't care.
You have a wonderful day, bro, and I'll see you again soon.
That's so good.
That's Stuart Varney talking to a black guy.
That is the best thing ever. Nick from Manitoba. Hey, Michael, great show today. Great appearance on Polite Conversations. Oh, yes. I liked talking with her. You didn't lose the right to talk about Islam after getting eviscerated in the Sargon debate. Martin Luther King would have condemned Islam as the motherlode of bad ideas and would say, "You're my friend. You, my friend, are a racist." On the Trevor Noah AOC interview, do you assume his questions reflect his personal views? Is it not? Yeah, I do. After watching that, is it not possible he has a national liberal audience watching in mind because he still asks these types of dumb questions? Could be part of it. Lastly, I think my neighbor should join the Democratic Party to be sure he knows how to ground and pound my wife. Oh, nice. All right, let's end a little bit more pleasantly. The final I Am of the weekend. Louis from Texas. Have a great weekend. You all are the best.
Have a wonderful day, bro, and I'll see you again soon.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how